A cold winter breeze sweeps past a snow-covered castle as an anguished voice cries out. The voice desperately demands to be sent back to the house where she originally lived. Hannah begs her to calm down, but the red-haired lady fiercely rejects her title. Shivering with anger, she declares she cannot live as the wife of a bastard or spend her life with someone like that. Looking desperately at the maid, she asks why even Hannah refuses to understand her. Hannah tries to explain herself, but the red-haired lady steps back, ordering her to stay away. Facing the maid, the distressed lady declares she would rather end it all than be dragged around. Suddenly, her foot slips on the icy snow. Losing her balance, the red-haired lady plummets backward into the freezing air. Hannah screams in absolute horror as a loud splash echoes across the winter landscape. A quiet chill fills the air outside the frosted windows of the quiet palace. Arkid sits silently beside the bed where the unconscious red-haired lady now lies. Staring at her sleeping face, the sorrowful boy wonders how she could do something so reckless. With a heavy heart, Arkid asks if she truly hated him that much. He clutches his head in deep grief, devastated that she would try to take her own life. A sudden plunge into deep water triggers a distant, painful memory of being adopted. She recalls believing her adoptive parents were good people, a sweet memory that shatters. Once they had their own biological child, she realized she was no longer considered family. Finding solace in a novel, she felt a deep connection to the struggling male lead. Lost in her thoughts, she walked down the street while reading her favorite book. A sudden blinding glare of headlights flashes directly in her path. Falling through the water, her dying gaze reflects the image of a red-haired girl. Enveloped in total darkness, a confused voice wonders whose body she has entered. She realizes she now has the pomegranate-colored hair and rare blue eyes of a novel character. The stunning realization hits her that she has been reincarnated as the tragic heroine Rowena Hadelruss. She remembers Rowena as a fiery, aggressive character who constantly clashed with the young Duke. Unfortunately, Rowena's tragic actions led to her premature demise, leaving her maids in tears. Accepting her new reality, Rowena sighs, noting she never had much attachment to her past life. Looking at her hands, she decides she should be grateful for the second chance. She happily realizes she can now admire her favorite novel character in person. Overjoyed, Rowena dances around, vowing to live happily as his most dedicated supporter. However, waking up in pajamas, she feels a strange, biting chill in the luxurious room. A maid quietly watches over her as she rests in the cold chambers. Rowena ponders the mystery of why her character died so early in the original Twilight. Suddenly, a loud, startling crash echoes from somewhere down the hall. Startled by the sudden noise, Rowena turns around in confusion to find its source. Remembering Arkid, she runs down the corridor and bursts through the doors. Rowena gasps in shock upon finding Arkid injured on the floor of the blood-splattered library. The young boy winces in pain as he presses a bloody cloth against his forehead. Rowena gasps at Arkid's wound, her anger instantly flaring at whoever hurt him. Baron Lorque coldly tells her that it is inappropriate to interrupt a private lesson. Rowena demands to know what happened, stating she heard strange noises coming from the room. The tutor casually brushes it off as a minor accident during routine corporal punishment. Baron Lorque falsely claims the young Grand Duke simply tripped while refusing his punishment. Infuriated by his blatant lies, Rowena angrily stomps her foot on the floor. She fiercely accuses Baron Lorque of abuse while he smugly asks if she doubts his words. The smug tutor suggests they ask Arkid directly to resolve the matter. Arkid keeps his eyes downcast, silent and tense under the heavy pressure. Rowena clenches her fists and passionately yells that this is clearly abuse, not punishment. Baron Lorque ominously asks if she will regret her words, but Rowena fiercely stands her ground. Narrative text reveals Baron Lorque acts boldly because his sister is the Grand Duke's lover. The Grand Duke's generous favor toward his lover extends directly to her brother, the tutor. Oblivious to how quickly fortune can turn, the tutor boastfully flaunts his unchecked power. Rowena internally scoffs at his arrogance, knowing he will be cast aside within a month. Rowena sharply warns the tutor that he will regret abusing the young Grand Duke. The tutor condescendingly defends his harsh methods by blaming the boy's lack of preparation. Rowena gasps in disbelief at the tutor's absurd justification while Arkid watches in silent worry. Rowena angrily stomps toward the desk, mockingly demanding clarification on this so-called lesson preparation. Rowena points to the massive pile, demanding if anyone could master such lessons in one day. She argues that even her own brother struggled with a mere fraction of that workload. The tutor patronizingly implies others easily manage, sparking Rowena's fiery defense of her brother's intelligence. Rowena expertly corners the tutor, accusing him of calling a young noble marchioness a dunce. Rowena notes that 15 is young, then pointedly asks the tutor for her husband's age. The tutor reluctantly reveals Arkid is only 14, falling straight into Rowena's clever trap. The tutor desperately defends his methods, claiming a brutal schedule is necessary for the boy's future. Rowena dramatically twists his words again, accusing him of insulting her husband's intelligence and lineage. Rowena unleashes a scathing insult, labeling him an incompetent teacher who shifts blame onto students. The tutor's polite mask shatters as he darkly asks if she has finished speaking. Consumed by fury, the arrogant tutor raises his arm to violently strike the young duchess. Rowena smugly dares him to strike her, completely unfazed by his threatening physical display. A dark protective resolve promises to show the abusive tutor the meaning of true cruelty. Before any blow can land, a sudden hand intervenes and pulls Rowena safely away. Arkid bravely steps in front of Rowena, coldly commanding the abusive tutor to stay away. The shocked and angry tutor commands the young Grand Duke to step aside immediately. Arkid firmly refuses the tutor's demand, standing his ground to protect his wife. The young boy keeps his protective shield active, keeping his red-haired wife safely behind him. Arkid declares that he has finally reached the absolute limit of what he can endure. Arkid fiercely warns the tutor that while he can endure abuse, his wife is off limits. Arkid reiterates his firm warning, establishing that his wife is completely off limits to abuse. Standing tall, the young Grand Duke shields his stunned wife from the tutor's wrath. Rowena's heart swells with immense pride and joy at her husband's courageous protective stance. The young couple stands united hand in hand, leaving the abusive tutor utterly speechless and defeated. A close-up of their clasped hands highlights the growing trust and alliance between them. Sensing his power slip away, the nervous tutor quickly excuses his actions as a misunderstanding. The cornered tutor bows deeply, offering a forced apology for his harsh words and actions. Rowena playfully delivers a parting insult, insincerely apologizing for calling him a complete moron. Shaking with suppressed rage, the humiliated tutor glares at Rowena while Arkid shields her. A tense close-up captures the tutor's bitter humiliation as he furiously grits his teeth. The humiliated tutor storms out of the library, leaving Rowena to mock his childish retreat. With the tyrant gone, the young husband and wife stand hand in hand in the peaceful library. Arkid awkwardly asks how much longer she intends to hold on to his hand. Startled and blushing, Rowena quickly releases his hand with a highly embarrassed apology. Arkid turns away coldly, muttering that her interference was entirely unnecessary and unexpected. Arkid's sudden cold shoulder leaves Rowena looking deeply hurt and disappointed by his rejection. Rowena softly calls after her husband as he turns to leave the messy library. Arkid bitterly asks if he has ever truly been a real husband to her. Desperate to mend their rift, Rowena reaches out and pleads with him to wait. Rowena demands he treat his injury, threatening to hunt him down if he doesn't. Arkid softly relents, promising to hide his injury so as not to cause trouble. Rowena watches him walk away, her gaze filled with quiet concern and new resolve. Arkid walks away as Rowena sits on the floor, calling out to clarify her true intentions. The dark-haired Grand Duke confronts Rowena about her interference with the tutor's lesson earlier that day. Sitting in the Grand Parlor, the Grand Duke demands an explanation from Rowena regarding her behavior. With a swift turn of her head, the red-haired Rowena prepares to face the accusations head-on. Rowena directly questions the blonde-haired Lady Lork, asking if her brother only reported the interference. Lady Lork defensively asks if Rowena is accusing her brother of hiding his own misconduct. Clutching her chest in mock offense, the blonde lady dramatically gasps at the accusation. Rowena points out Lady Lork's defensive reaction as a sign of guilt, prompting the Grand Duke to intervene. The Grand Duke sternly reminds Rowena that she must have a valid reason to interfere with the tutor. Rowena internally complains that the Grand Duke is blindly defending the tutor solely because of his lover. Arkid shifts uncomfortably, feeling the heavy tension of the room pressing down on them. Arkid steps in, telling Rowena that he intends to resolve the situation himself. Rowena looks at him in utter astonishment, completely caught off guard by his sudden intervention. With a subtle nod, Arkid signals his readiness to handle the conflict on his own. Overwhelmed by Arkid's charming resolve, Rowena swoons internally, her heart racing with admiration. Rowena happily realizes that Arkid's actions are only making her fall deeper for him. Rowena suddenly bows deeply in front of everyone, shocking Arkid with her dramatic display of respect. Rowena is determined to take full responsibility for her actions rather than letting Arkid shoulder the blame. Leaning close to her husband, Rowena whispers a reassurance that she will handle everything. Rowena boldly admits to interfering, explaining she did so because the tutor was physically abusing her husband. The Grand Duke is taken aback, repeating the word abuse in sudden concern and disbelief. Rowena describes hearing a loud crash and rushing into the study to find a terrifying scene. She dramatically embellishes her memory, imagining Arkid collapsed and bleeding on the floor from the tutor's assault. A hand gently reaches out to examine the scrape on the young boy's forehead. Arkid quietly insists he is fine, revealing his "I'm just a language model and can't help with that." Rowena dramatically covers Arkid's eyes, passionately arguing that he was severely injured and unable to stand. While Arkid looks completely bewildered, Rowena vows internally to protect her husband from any future harm. Lady Lork bursts into tears, pleading with the Grand Duke to ignore Rowena's exaggerated claims. Clinging to the Grand Duke, Lady Lork claims Arkid lied, but the Duke questions her defense of physical violence. Lady Lork defends the violence, prompting Rowena to happily realize this lover's downfall is imminent. The Grand Duke's recent anti-abuse bill means he absolutely cannot tolerate the tutor's violent behavior. The Grand Duke coldly dismisses Lady Lork, ignoring her desperate pleas to stay. Lady Lork frantically protests, reminding him of his promise to punish the Grand Duchess instead. The Grand Duke glares coldly, demanding to know since when she dared to refuse his orders. The Grand Duke banishes her from his castle and orders her personal belongings to be cleared out. Guards drag the screaming Lady Lork away as Rowena notes her superficiality and total ignorance. The Grand Duke turns to Rowena, initiating a quiet discussion about the incident. Rowena makes a playful gesture, promising to keep the entire matter a closely guarded secret. Satisfied with her response, the Grand Duke formally dismisses both of them to rest. The heavy double doors of the drawing room click shut behind the departing young couple. Rowena skips happily down the corridor, basking in the success of her defense. The Grand Duke is left behind, staring blankly as he processes Arkad's surprising words. A sudden cold shiver runs down Rowena's spine, breaking her joyful mood. Smiling brightly, Rowena happily guides her husband down the hallway by his hand. Rowena glows with joy as she firmly holds Arkad's hand, feeling closer to him than ever. Suddenly, Arkad comes to a sharp halt, causing her to stop and look back in surprise. Rowena recalls that they were originally destined to be an unhappily married couple in the novel. The two stand in the quiet hallway as Arkad's sudden silence halts their peaceful walk. Arkad keeps his eyes shadowed, his posture tense as he struggles to voice his thoughts. Rowena asks if defending her husband is wrong, but Arkad softly replies that he meant something else entirely. Rowena realizes her husband is confused by her sudden protectiveness, admitting she lost her composure because of the abusive tutor. Rowena reaches out to check on Arkad, asking if he is hurt anywhere. Arkad insists he is fine, but Rowena firmly demands to examine him herself to be sure. Looking deeply into her eyes, Arkad questions why she is acting so differently all of a sudden. Rowena notices how gently Arkad holds her hand, silently wondering about his cautious behavior. Flashback memories reveal Arkad's deep guilt over Rowena's unhappy forced marriage, recalling her bitter blame and violent anger. The painful flashback continues as she aggressively rejects his respectful address, forbidding him from calling her that again. A harsh, lingering memory echoes of her declaring she never wanted to marry someone like him. Rowena realizes that suddenly denying her past hatred would seem highly suspicious given her former lengthy tantrums. Rowena reluctantly confesses to Arkad that she did indeed hate him in the past. The painful weight of past memories hangs heavily in the quiet space between the young couple. Rowena passionately pleads with him to believe that her feelings have completely changed and she hates him no longer. I understand you're going through a really painful time, but there's support available for you. Please consider calling the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. There's hope for healing. Rowena internally acknowledges the painful truth that the original owner of her body genuinely despised her husband. Arkad tightly clenches his fist as he painfully recalls the horrifying moment she fell into the water. Arkad asks her to consider the sheer agony and helplessness he felt witnessing her near-death experience. He admits he accepted her hatred, but seeing her try to take her own life was unbearable. Overwhelmed by grief, Arkad covers his face and asks how much more miserable she wants him to feel. Rowena calls out desperately as Arkad suddenly turns away to leave her behind in the hallway. Rowena stands frozen, unable to immediately bridge the physical and emotional distance between them. Turning back slightly, Arkad pleads with her to stop confusing him with her contradictory actions. Arkad walks over to a nearby desk, leaving Rowena standing alone in the quiet hallway. Arkad's hand reaches down to pick up a formal document laying on the wooden desk. Holding the paper, Arkad tells Rowena that he is finally ready to grant her heart's desire. Arkad hands Rowena the document, telling her to take the divorce papers she has repeatedly demanded. Rowena stares in complete shock as she realizes what document he has just handed her. Angrily tearing the document to shreds, Rowena fiercely declares that she absolutely does not want a divorce. Rowena loudly refuses to sign the divorce papers, throwing the torn fragments into the air. Rowena dramatically throws her arms wide as the shredded divorce papers rain down around them. Arkad stands stunned as Rowena internally celebrates possessing her favorite character's wife, shouting that she refuses any returns. Arkad points out that she protested every single day for a divorce, leaving Rowena flustered. Rowena admits she made things difficult in the past, but promises she will never do so again. Arkad looks away with a somber and skeptical expression, unable to easily accept her promises. Rowena realizes that if he won't believe her words, she must play a completely different card. Rowena claims she wasn't trying to end her life that day, but simply lost her footing and slipped. A vivid memory shows her falling backward into the deep, bubbling blue water of the lake. The memory captures her sinking into the dark depths of the lake, absolutely terrified of dying. Rowena tells him that she would have died that day if he hadn't saved her life. Rowena thanks Arkad for saving her, but he politely declines, stating it was his duty as her husband. She emphasizes how freezing and deep the water was, noting most people would have hesitated to jump in. Arkad quietly asks if that traumatic incident is what finally caused her to change her mind about him. Rowena resolves to win over her husband slowly, comparing him to a wary kitten that must be approached step by step. Arkid warns her that she will regret passing up her last chance to leave, but she firmly rejects it. Rowena beams with a radiant, joyful smile, completely undeterred by his warning. Arkid is left staring at her in silent bewilderment, completely disarmed by her bright smile. Her touch is welcomed by a sudden firm grasp as she grabs his hands in her enthusiasm. A cute illustration shows Rowena filled with newfound determination to win over her husband. Joyfully holding his hands, Rowena triumphantly declares that there is absolutely no backing out now. Later, Rowena relaxes in a warm, steaming bath, letting her worries melt away. Rowena reflects in the bath, surprised by how deeply traumatized Arkid was by her falling into the lake. A flashback reveals that Arkid saved Rowena's life from the lake after her dramatic crying fit. Rowena relaxes in the bath, wondering if the original owner of her body died that day. She celebrates her unique position as the closest person to her absolute favorite novel character. Rowena happily concludes that destiny gave her this chance to help Arkid succeed. She reminds herself of the tragic fate where Rowena dies in 7 years. Rowena steps onto the carpet, resolved to secure Arkid's position over the next 7 years. Rowena gets dressed, recognizing that her husband and in-laws currently despise her. A maid interrupts Rowena's thoughts to announce that the Grand Duchess is summoning her. A sudden cold sweat breaks out on Rowena's face at the unexpected summon. Rowena inwardly panics at being called by the intimidating Grand Duchess so soon. The scene shifts to the elegant sitting room where the blonde Grand Duchess awaits. Entering the room, Rowena politely asks her mother-in-law if she had requested her presence. The blonde Grand Duchess sits gracefully, observing Rowena over her teacup. The Grand Duchess questions her sudden familiarity, but Rowena decides to keep calling her mother regardless. Rowena smiles brightly, determined to close the emotional distance between them. Rowena happily notices her mother-in-law smiling back, leaving nothing more to say. Rowena eagerly asks why she was summoned, prompting the madam to tell her to sit down first. The Grand Duchess mentions hearing that Lady Lork was dragged away in tears. The Grand Duchess narrows her red eyes, demanding to know what transpired. Rowena claims nothing happened, realizing her mother-in-law is trying to sound her out. A tense and thorny atmosphere fills the room as the Grand Duchess listens. Rowena attributes Lady Lork's tears to the Duke's warning, keeping the abuse secret. A narration explains that the long-term mistress never expected to be dismissed so cleanly. Rowena recalls deliberately leaving a subtle clue to make the Duke investigate the tutor. The text block confirms that the Grand Duke was the one who did the dumping. The Grand Duchess notes Lady Lork's absence, and Rowena suggests her pride was hurt. Rowena suggests Lady Lork might return soon due to her deep, lingering attachment. The Grand Duchess agrees that Lady Lork's personality means she won't sit still. Rowena reassures her that the Duke won't return, prompting the madam to ask why. Rowena mimics the Duke's furious expression, coaxing a sudden laugh from her mother-in-law. The Grand Duchess amusedly notes that Rowena is the only one who describes him so. Rowena feels relieved seeing her mother-in-law's mood improve so significantly. The Grand Duchess suddenly asks if Arkid is feeling unwell. A sudden look of pure shock crosses Rowena's face at the unexpected question. The Grand Duchess explains that a physician was sent to examine Arkid. Rowena realizes that the Grand Duke must have inspected Arkid's physical injuries. A flashback reveals the doctor discovering extensive bruises all over the young boy's body. The Grand Duchess demands to know her silence, leaving Rowena struggling for an explanation. Rowena quickly lies that the physician was checking her own recovery from the lake. The Grand Duchess bluntly asks if the young couple has ever shared a bed. Rowena's face turns bright red with embarrassment at the personal question. The Grand Duchess presses her, demanding to know what she is trying to say. Rowena boldly declares her intention to fully commit to her role as Arkid's wife. The Grand Duchess is utterly dumbfounded by Rowena's sudden declaration of wifely devotion. As the Grand Duchess questions her understanding, a sudden knock sounds at the door. The heavy wooden door clicks open, revealing a visitor stepping into the room. Young Arkid stands in the doorway, his expression calm but firm. Rowena is completely startled, wondering why her husband has arrived at this hour. The Grand Duchess coldly reminds Arkid that he was not granted permission to enter. Arkid steps forward protectively, calmly stating he came because his wife was summoned. The blonde Grand Duchess indignantly questions if she is forbidden from summoning her own daughter-in-law. Arkid's protective voice from outside asserts that Rowena is still recovering and needs rest. Arkid steps into the room, telling his mother that she does not need to go that far. Rowena is deeply touched by Arkid's protective behavior, despite his mother's dry remarks. Grand Duchess dismisses them, noting she has finished asking her questions. As Arkid turns to leave, Rowena stops him and asks him to Weedamoit. Rowena turns back and runs quickly toward her seated mother-in-law. Rowena politely asks if she can whisper a secret to her mother-in-law before leaving. Rowena surprises the Grand Duchess by planting a sudden affectionate kiss on her cheek. Flustered and shocked, the Grand Duchess stammers in bewilderment at the sudden display of affection. Rowena beams with the triumphant and radiant smile, incredibly pleased with her bold move. The scene shifts to the Grand Duke's elegant blue-toned study where he sits reading. The blonde Grand Duchess enters the room, her presence immediately catching her husband's attention. Looking up from his book, the dark-haired Grand Duke asks what brings her to his study. She casually mentions hearing that the tutor's guest room has been cleared out. She questions his sudden dismissal of Lady Bestia, while he silently wonders why her cheeks are red. The Grand Duchess plays with her hair, trying to maintain her composure while sounding him out. He confirms that Lady Bestia will no longer be returning to the castle. The Grand Duke casually sets his book down onto the table beside a sofa. She directly questions the reason behind his sudden decision to dismiss the tutor. The Grand Duke dryly asks since when she became so interested in his personal affairs. She cheekily responds that she is only interested in his affairs when they involve his misfortune. He comments on her unexpected interest, to which he replies that now he knows the truth. The Grand Duke silently observes her, his expression growing more calculated and intense. She demands to know why he dismissed the tutor right in front of their son and daughter-in-law. The Grand Duke bursts into laughter, finding her sudden barrage of questioning highly amusing. Standing up from the sofa, the Grand Duke slowly walks over to close the distance between them. Reaching out, the Grand Duke gently tilts her chin upward and asks if she truly wants to know. He leans in close, towering over her amidst a dramatic backdrop of glowing blue roses. She firmly places her hand on his chest, warning him that he is standing much too close. The Grand Duke lets out a knowing, amused smirk at her defensive reaction. He mentions hearing she barged into lessons, prompting her to remark on how fast word travels. She accuses him of keeping secrets, while he teasingly claims he assumed she had no interest in him. The Grand Duchess realizes that everything is playing out exactly as Rowena had predicted. A memory reveals Rowena whispering that the Grand Duke is starved for affection and will easily confess. A cute visual shows Rowena proudly plotting her clever matchmaking scheme as Arkid watches. The Grand Duke silently reflects on Rowena, realizing she is far more clever than she appears. The Grand Duchess breaks the silence, asking why he is staring at her so intently. She demands to know why he laughed, prompting him to ask if laughing is also forbidden. His hand suddenly slams against the wall beside her head, trapping her in place. He firmly demands an answer, while she inwardly rolls her eyes at his bratty behavior. The two stand locked in a tense, silent standoff in the middle of the study. The Grand Duke is caught completely off guard, his face flushed with sudden embarrassment. The Grand Duchess wears a victorious smile, thoroughly enjoying her husband's flustered state. She slyly asks if he got so close because he wanted to kiss her. He stammers in panic to deny her claim, which she casually dismisses with a knowing look. She walks past him, coolly reminding him of their mutual disdain for each other's touch. She confidently notes that their estranged relationship is common knowledge throughout the Empire. She bluntly adds that everyone knows they are practically strangers who have never shared a bed. Turning back to him, she warns him to start talking unless he wants that kiss. Leaning in close, the dark-haired Grand Duke demands to know what happened in the study. At dinner, the Grand Duke announces that Baron Lork will no longer be coming to the castle. Swirling his wine, the Grand Duke advises them never to stay silent if they are mistreated. Arkid skeptically questions his father, reminding him of his past instruction to live as if dead. The Grand Duke seriously clarifies that his advice did not mean he should endure a beating. A sharp slice cuts through the meat as the Duke firmly commands his son to strike back instead. The Duke explains dealing with retaliation is easier than enduring abuse, and Arkid promises to remember it. Rowena inwardly fumes at the Duke's aggressive advice, worried it will corrupt her gentle favorite character. Narration explains that while Arkid physically resembled his father, their personalities were worlds apart. Due to his defensive nature, Arkid frequently clashed with the novel's original female lead, Mabel. Rowena gags at the memory of their messy relationship but happily notes that everything has changed now. The young couple finishes their dinner in comfortable silence at the grand dining table. A sudden polite knock echoes as a hand taps gently against the ornate wooden door. Opening the door, Rowena greets the maid who politely requests entry while holding a flower basket. Rowena gazes at the colorful bouquet, curious about the sudden abundance of fresh flowers. The smiling maids carry several beautiful baskets overflowing with vibrant fresh blossoms. Rowena questions having a festival in this cold weather, but the maid clarifies they're sowing seeds. Text explains that they must plant seeds manually due to the barren soil of Delis. The rugged green mountains of Delis tower over the barren plains waiting for spring. The maid playfully points out that Rowena should already know this, leaving her utterly shocked. The maids assume she was simply overwhelmed as a new bride, and Rowena nervously agrees. The maid warns her not to run away this time to avoid another scolding from the Grand Duchess. The blue-haired maid playfully asks if she promises not to cause trouble for the Grand Duke. Rowena stomps her feet in mock outrage while the maids giggle at her cute reaction. Back in his quiet study, young Arkid sits alone at his desk, focused on reading. Arkid quietly contemplates the unexpected news of receiving a new tutor and a fencing master. Arkid wonders if his father truly meant his advice about learning to strike back. Hearing faint laughter from outside, Arkid turns his head, wondering if the sound came from Rowena. His footsteps echo softly as he walks over to the window to peer outside. Spotting the maids outside, Arkid tells himself he shouldn't eavesdrop on their private conversation. Rowena's sudden, passionate declaration of love for him leaves Arkid frozen in complete shock. Overwhelmed by her unexpected confession, Arkid's face flushes bright red as he covers his mouth. Stuttering in his thoughts, Arkid desperately tries to convince himself that it cannot be true. He recalls how she used to scream her hatred for him daily, unable to understand this change. Arkid admits to himself that he felt disappointed when she stopped calling him by her sweet nickname. Arkid questions his own heart, utterly bewildered by his sudden feelings of disappointment. Holding his forehead, Arkid struggles to comprehend what could possibly be going through her mind. Arkid lets out a deep, troubled sigh as his face remains completely flushed with embarrassment. Slumping onto the floor, Arkid reminds himself that she had always claimed she hated him. The sound of hooves echoes as the carriage travels down a scenic, sunlit country road. Inside the carriage, Arkid quietly admits he never expected her to ask him for help. Arkid notes that she has never wanted his assistance with anything in the past. Rowena guiltily recalls how her original self had screamed at him when he tried to help. Rowena sighs in regret, thinking she would have showered him with kisses instead of being cruel. Arkid asks if she is nervous about last year's scolding, catching her completely off guard. Arkid points to his mouth, explaining he asked because her lips have been constantly twitching. Rowena admits her mother-in-law is scary, but Arkid notes her affectionate cheek kiss contradicts that. Comical memory of her bold cheek kiss leaves Arkid feeling flustered all over again. Rowena explains that fear prevents closeness, leaving Arkid to ponder the idea of growing closer. Arkid quietly admits that her hostile behavior had kept him constantly on edge until recently. Rowena looks at Arkid inside the carriage, pleading with him to accept her as she is now. Arkid looks back at her with a bewildered expression, processing her unexpected words. Rowena clarifies that she wants him to focus on her current self, not her hostile past. Rowena apologizes for all the trouble she caused him, but Arkid tries to dismiss the apology. Rowena gently places her hand over his, promising to do much better from now on. Arkid is caught completely off guard, staring at her hand in silent shock. Rowena notices his hand is cold and gently encourages him to speak his mind freely. Rowena holds his hand warmly, teasingly pointing out that he is the one who is nervous. A sudden jolt of the carriage wheels signals that they have finally arrived at their destination. Rowena happily extends her hand to Arkid, eagerly asking if he is ready to go. Arkid remains momentarily frozen, staring up at her radiant smile in quiet wonder. Arkid's expression softens as a gentle, quiet smile graces his face. At a nearby garden estate, Lady Lork's tea companion gossips about the Grand Duke's courtlessness. Lady Lork sips her tea in silence, her expression turning tense at the remarks. Lady Lork attempts to play off her rejection, claiming the Duke is not the only man around. Her companion quickly shares a rumor that the Grand Duke has already found a new lover. Companion notes seeing the Duke's carriage heading toward the seed farm, implying a secret rendezvous. Enraged, Lady Lork fumes over how quickly she was discarded after 3 years of dedication. Her companion casually remarks that it is simply in a man's nature to wander. Companion goads her further, saying even the most beautiful flower eventually loses its novelty. Outraged by the insults, Lady Lork slams her fist onto the tea table. Lady Lork abruptly demands that her companion leave the estate immediately. Her companion giggles mockingly as she departs, thoroughly amused by Lady Lork's explosive reaction. Upon arriving at the seed farm, the manager Mac warmly welcomes the young couple. Mac pleasantly notes that it has been a whole year since their last visit. Arkid is surprised to hear of their prior visit, while Rowena looks on with mild apprehension. Mac inquires if everything was all right, recalling how displeased the Grand Duchess had been back then. An imposing memory of the angry Grand Duchess as a wolf leaves Rowena deeply terrified. Shifting the mood, Rowena enthusiastically declares she is fully prepared to see the farm today. Mac leads them down the path, explaining the seasonal blooming process of the Delis flowers. Mac adds that magic can be utilized to accelerate the flowers' growth if necessary. The wooden doors swing open to reveal a breathtakingly vibrant field of blooming flowers. Rowena beams with pure joy at the sight, while Arkid quietly watches her delight. The young couple stands together, admiring the sprawling and colorful landscape. Rowena gazes in awe, expressing how truly beautiful the flowers are. Arkid looks at her in surprise, recalling that she used to hate Delis flowers. A painful memory reminds Rowena of how she had harshly rejected a bouquet he once offered. Deeply embarrassed by her past cruelty, Rowena quickly stammers out an apology. Arkid smiles warmly, expressing his genuine relief that she does not actually dislike them. Rowena swoons over his sweet, angelic reaction, completely charmed by his gentle nature. Rowena excitedly reaches out to pick a flower, but is suddenly interrupted by a noise. Lady Lork storms into the flower field, ignoring the manager's desperate attempts to stop her. Demanding to know the Duke's whereabouts, Lady Lork aggressively confronts the startled young couple. Arkid steps forward defensively, firmly reprimanding Lady Lork for her highly disrespectful behavior. Lady Lork fiercely demands the truth, suspecting they are hiding the Grand Duke's actions. Lady Lork insists she heard the Duke was present, refusing to back down. As Rowena prepares to intervene, her vision suddenly blurs and she is overcome with dizziness. Rowena collapses backward, weakly calling out Arkid's name as she loses her balance. Arkid catches her in a panic, desperately calling out to her as she loses consciousness. Rowena slips away as an ominous dark energy swirls, leaving Arkid and Lady Lork in shock. Rowena's consciousness fades into absolute darkness as she fears she might die right then and there. The carriage speeds through the castle gates, kicking up dust in its desperate rush. Quick, frantic footsteps echo through the grand corridors as someone runs for urgent help. Arkid carries the unconscious Rowena in his arms, shouting frantically for assistance. The castle butler and maids gasp in shock upon seeing Arkid carrying the unconscious Rowena. The butler urgently demands to know what happened and immediately commands Arkid to summon a physician. Arkid, looking deeply panicked, swiftly responds that he will fetch the doctor immediately. Rowena lies quietly in her bed, having fortunately survived the terrifying crisis. The physician explains that Arkid's quick first aid saved Rowena's life, then asks what caused her to collapse. The physician diagnoses it as an acute allergic shock, which the blue-haired maid finds hard to believe. And the physician asks if she visited a pollen-rich place. The blue-haired maid confirms they went to the seed farm. The physician deduces her immune system weakened, while Arkid guiltily recalls her charming, flushed face among the flowers. The blue-haired maid explains it was Rowena's first time seeing the flowers, leading Arkid to ask about last year's symptoms. While the physician hesitates to check the records, the blue-haired maid suddenly remembers Rowena was sick last year too. The maid recalls that Rowena had similar red cheeks back then, though her symptoms seem milder. Arkid asks if it occurred after she went out with her mother, shocking the maid who promised to keep it secret. Arkid sighs, realizing she collapsed in the field because of an allergy to the Delis flower. Arkid questions why a thorough test wasn't done back then, while the physician defends himself, saying her past symptoms were mild. Arkid fumes inwardly, disgusted by the sheer incompetence of the household staff in caring for Rowena's health. Arkid remembers how the servants ignored his own needs, but is devastated to realize their negligence extended to Rowena. Arkid resolves that he should have expected proper care for her because she is his wife. Arkid walks away with cold determination, declaring that this severe negligence will not be ignored. Lying in bed, Rowena's hand twitches slightly as she slowly begins to regain consciousness. Rowena slowly opens her eyes, rubbing her forehead as she groggily awakens from her deep sleep. Sitting up, Rowena is startled to find Arkid asleep at her bedside and quietly calls his name. Rowena gazes softly at Arkid, deeply touched as she wonders if he stayed by her side nursing her all night. Rowena greets him with a sweet smile, asking if morning has arrived as she gently wakes him. Arkid leaps up in a panic, desperately asking if she is feeling well or experiencing any pain. Rowena reassures him she is fine, though she secretly swoons over how incredibly handsome he looks just waking up. Looking at his intense expression, Rowena tentatively asks him if he was worried about her. Arkid quietly confirms that he was, leaving Rowena surprised since she never expected him to care. Rowena is overjoyed by his confession, internally squealing with happiness that Arkid actually worried about her. Arkid gently places his hand on Rowena's forehead to check her temperature. Arkid notes she still has a mild fever and shocks her by revealing she was asleep for 10 days. Arkid looks at her seriously, asking if she truly wonders whether he was worried. Arkid declares he was absolutely worried as her husband, reminding her that she nearly died. Arkid tells her she cannot comprehend how terrified he felt staying by her side for 10 long days. Arkid confesses his constant dread that something had gone terribly wrong because she wouldn't wake up. Surprised by his vulnerability, Rowena quietly calls out his name in soft realization. Arkid tears up over the thought of losing her, prompting Rowena to grab his hands and comfort him. Rowena reassures him to look closely, reminding him that she is safe and right in front of him. Rowena feels a wave of guilt, realizing how much her collapse made Arkid suffer. Rowena wonders aloud why she collapsed so suddenly. Arkid explains she has a Delis flower allergy, leaving her shocked since those flowers are everywhere in Hadelris. But Arkid tells her not to pretend she didn't know, pointing out she fainted from it last year too. Rowena wonders in disbelief how her original self managed to endure living in Delis with such an allergy. Rowena recalls the original novel, remembering that Arkid's late wife hated the flowers so much they were banned from the castle. Rowena finally understands that the original lady's hatred of the flowers was actually a desperate defense against her fatal allergy. Arkid gently scolds her, stating she shouldn't have hidden such a dangerous condition from him. Arkid questions if she hid it because she didn't trust him, but Rowena quickly and frantically denies it. Rowena nervously fidgets with her dress as she quietly offers a sincere apology. Rowena looks deeply remorseful and anxious as she awaits Arkid's reaction to her words. Arkid smiles warmly and reassures her, promising that he will try his best. The young couple sits together in the quiet room, sharing a calm, peaceful moment. Lady Lork sits trembling in fear as her name is coldly called out. The Grand Duchess questions Lady Lork's fearful reaction while Lady Lork stammers in terror. The floating bubble recalls how Lady Lork had acted arrogantly in front of the children. In a memory, Arkid stands before his mother and earnestly requests her urgent assistance. Arkid firmly asks his mother to ensure Lady Lork never approaches his wife again. The Grand Duchess criticizes Lady Lork's insolent behavior, leaving her unable to defend herself. The Grand Duchess coldly commands that Lady Lork be banished from the territory immediately. Rowena clutches her head in absolute disbelief over the dramatic turn of events. The maids make her over Rowena's sudden collapse, defending her against accusations of negligence. The maid angrily blames the previous doctor's incompetence while Chibi Rowena looks on confusedly. The maid happily expresses relief that Arkid secured a highly competent new personal physician. Rowena beams with pure delight upon hearing about Arkid's thoughtful and caring actions. The narrative notes how Arkid seems to be the only one who truly cares. Rowena joyfully swoons over Arkid's affection while the maids watch her happy reaction. A maid teases Shuri for complaining about Arkid's protectiveness just a few days ago. Shuri quickly covers her colleague's mouth to enthusiastically praise the thorough new physician instead. As the maids praise the attentive physician Masa, Rowena silently doubts her own reputation. Rowena worries that her illness and the upcoming festival have displeased the Grand Duchess. The maid suddenly inquires about the seeds Rowena and Arkid plan to scatter together. The maid listlessly suggests using old seeds because the scattering process is a chore. When the maid jokingly suggests dandelion fluff, Rowena suddenly has a brilliant creative idea. Rowena dashes off to find her mother after hearing she is visiting the farm. The maid notices a carriage arriving, signaling the Grand Duchess has just returned home. Determined to act quickly, Rowena rushes down the hall with her maid close behind. Rowena excitedly calls out as she spots her mother standing in the grand foyer. Rowena attempts to welcome her mother back but suddenly loses her footing on the stairs. Rowena trips and goes flying down the staircase, prompting a panicked scream from her maid. Rowena braces herself for a painful impact, fully expecting to crash onto the floor. The Grand Duchess catches Rowena mid-air, leaving Rowena feeling like an overexcited, blushing puppy. Flustered, Rowena quickly steps back and sheepishly asks if her mother has returned. The Grand Duchess calmly confirms her return and asks what prompted such a frantic welcome. Rowena eagerly requests a discussion about the upcoming flower festival, which her mother expected. A beautifully arranged tea table is filled with sparkling desserts, strawberries, and hot tea. Over tea, Rowena expresses her regret that her flower allergy caused her mother trouble. The Duchess fiercely demands the instigator's name before dismissing Rowena's help as unnecessary. Rowena shakes her head determinedly, insisting that she truly wants to assist her mother. The Grand Duchess reacts skeptically when Rowena claims she has a brilliant new idea. Rowena explains that most people find the traditional seed scattering process to be a chore. Rowena suggests a creative alternative of planting the flowers in the sky instead. Rowena details releasing seed-filled sky lanterns, combining seed scattering with beautiful, memorable celebrations. The Grand Duchess admits she is surprised by Rowena's deep care for the territory. Her mother teased that she expected Rowena to demand the flowers be burned down. Rowena cleared her throat, stating she is fine as long as she avoids them. The Grand Duchess points out that they cannot ban popular flowers solely on her account. Rowena blinks in surprise, caught off guard by her mother's unexpectedly empathetic statement. The Grand Duchess promises to discuss the lantern idea with retainers, satisfying Rowena. The Grand Duchess warmly notes Rowena calling her mother, to which Rowena joyfully agrees. Rowena stands by the door looking startled as she prepares to leave. Arkid approaches Rowena in the hallway, asking if his mother scolded her in her bedchamber. Rowena frantically denies it, explaining she simply wanted to help prepare for the flower festival. When Rowena asks where Arkid is heading, he halts in surprise, hesitating to answer. Rowena cheerfully guesses that he is headed to the training grounds for practice. Arkid wonders how she knows his schedule, prompting her to explain his daily routine. Rowena internally panics, realizing that knowing his precise schedule makes her sound like a stalker. She quickly covers her tracks by claiming she guessed based on his fencing practice attire. Rowena frantically rambles to assure him she is not secretly following him like a stalker. Arkid offers a soft, handsome smile that completely catches Rowena off guard. Beautiful blue flowers bloom as the warm, gentle atmosphere settles between them. Arkid gently tells her she should feel free to do whatever she wants. Rowena stands flustered, thinking that doing everything she wants would utterly horrify him. She imagines herself worshipping his pictures morning and night like a passionate superfan. She envisions herself creepily peeking through his window while he tries to study. A quiet groan of distress escapes Rowena as she realizes she must keep these intense urges hidden. She jokingly wonders if she should just start a fan club for him. At the Grand Flower Festival, Arkid explains the massive turnout to Rowena. The scene transitions as the celebration inside the Grand Festive Hall continues. Rowena politely asks Arkid to escort her since they are attending the event together. Arkid gently takes her hand, accepting her offer to escort her. A soft click sounds as they enter the banquet hall hand in hand. The other noble children turn and stare in surprise at the arriving couple. Rowena notices the heavy stares, wondering if it is because Archid is escorting her. Rowena spots Diana waving energetically at her from across the row. A sudden splash of water echoes in a memory of Archid being drenched. In the past, Diana insincerely apologized for spilling water on Archid. The former Rowena cruelly mocked him, warning him not to disappoint the Grand Duke. The girls laughed mockingly, declaring he would become the laughingstock of the party. Archid quietly submitted to their cruelty, leaving the present Rowena filled with deep guilt. Archid walked away in humiliation while present Rowena glares with resolve. The narrative notes how the original Rowena felt irritated by Archid's quiet, stoic reaction. Back in the present, Diana runs up and grabs Rowena's arm. Diana asks if Archid is blackmailing her with some secret weakness. A sharp smack echoes as Rowena coldly slaps Diana's hand away. Rowena fiercely demands if being escorted by her husband is considered a weakness. Rowena coldly dismisses Diana, who runs away crying after being thoroughly rejected. Archid asks if she is all right, and Rowena confirms she has no desire to remain friends. Archid leans in and softly whispers that she is truly changed. The young couple gazes deeply into each other's eyes, sharing a quiet, intimate moment. Rowena blushes furiously, incredibly flustered by Archid's sudden closeness and charm. The other guests watch them from a distance, murmuring with interest. Diana approaches Archid once again, speaking to him with hesitant tension. Diana defensively asks Archid what he did to make Rowena act so differently. Archid smirks and asks if she thinks he has blackmail on his wife. Archid coldly declares he only tolerated her because she was Rowena's friend. When Diana protests that she is still Rowena's friend, Archid retorts that his wife says otherwise. Diana stands horrified, utterly shaken by Archid's cold, intimidating presence. Archid steps forward, calling out Diana for her arrogance and superiority complex. A sudden sharp slip causes her heel to twist painfully on the polished floor. Diana falls to the floor with a loud crash, looking up at Archid in terror. Archid coldly demands that Diana leave immediately before his wife returns. Rowena arrives just in time to witness the tense confrontation in the hallway. Diana desperately attempts to explain her innocence to the newly arrived Rowena. Ignoring Diana completely, Rowena runs to Archid's side to ensure he is safe. Diana tries to defend herself by accusing Archid of shoving her. Diana tearfully complains about his coldness, looking up in disbelief. A simple, icy response completely dismisses Diana's dramatic protests. Diana freezes in utter shock at Rowena's surprisingly cold and unsympathetic reaction. Rowena looks down coldly, questioning why Diana expects her to care about her clumsy fall. Diana desperately pleads with Rowena to take her side, claiming they are close friends. Smiling brightly, Rowena officially breaks off their friendship and demands Diana leave them alone. A silent, furious glare escapes Diana as her anger boils over at the humiliation. Diana storms off in tears, declaring their friendship officially over. Rowena eagerly turns her attention back to Archid, checking if he was mistreated. Archid softly assures Rowena that he knows she would never act without reason. Rowena dramatically regrets leaving him unattended, wishing she had stayed close. Gentle Thought acknowledges that his lingering distress has vanished completely. Archid smiles warmly, deeply touched that Rowena stood up for him. Hearing her name called so softly leaves Rowena feeling absolutely starry-eyed. Archid gently confirms he called her by her first name, Rowena. Chibi Rowena rejoices internally like a blissful angel over his sweet gesture. Observing her flustered state, Chibi Archid hesitantly asks if he should stop. Rowena eagerly grasps his hands, frantically pleading with him to keep calling her name. As Archid softly agrees, Rowena's heart beats frantically with overwhelming joy and excitement. The scene shifts outside to a peaceful garden view of the quiet palace parlor. Diana suddenly bursts through the door crying hysterically, shattering the room's peace. Countess Reich gasps in alarm, demanding to know who dared mistreat her daughter. An urgent question hangs in the air regarding the incident with the young couple. The Grand Duchess calmly plays chess, completely unaffected by the dramatic entrance. Showing mild concern, the Grand Duchess instructs her maid to bring some water. A crystal glass is promptly prepared on a tray to soothe the guest. The Grand Duchess calmly asks for details, while Countess Reich dismisses it as childish. Diana tearfully details Rowena's rejection, sparking her mother's protective fury. Grand Duchess lets out a quiet sigh, finding the dramatic scene tedious. Slamming her hand down, Countess Reich indignantly demands that the insult not be overlooked. Countess Reich fiercely argues that the children require strict discipline to prevent being spoiled. A cold, low voice suddenly addresses Countess Reich, instantly commanding the room. The Grand Duchess warns Countess Reich about offering unsolicited advice beyond her standing. A heavy, tense atmosphere settles over the room as the Duchess asserts her authority. Placing her piece with a decisive click, the Grand Duchess coldly secures checkmate. Standing up, the Grand Duchess dismisses the match, calling her opponent incredibly dull. Countess Reich desperately begs the Duchess to wait as she turns to leave. A sudden crash echoes as a servant accidentally drops the glass of water. A sharp, furious glare from Countess Reich directed at Diana follows the accident. With a rough shove, Countess Reich angrily demands that Diana stop her annoying hiccuping. Back at the festival, Rowena observes Diana keeping a low profile, worrying about her reputation. Reaching out her hand, Rowena prepares to put her creative plan into action. Rowena smiles brightly, ready to present her ideas to win over the territory's favor. Rowena introduces a game called Petra, explaining she had it custom-made for the guests to enjoy. A green-haired boy dismisses the game as a low-class commoner pastime, while Rowena fumes internally. A blonde-haired girl eagerly volunteers to play, finding the game concept quite interesting. Arkid joins the game, prompting Rowena to suggest a three-way match while the arrogant boy mutters a snide comment. The green-haired boy makes a smug remark hinting at the Grand Duke's common origins, instantly provoking Rowena's wrath. The smug boy defensively claims he was only showing concern about wasting valuable gems on a commoner's game. Rowena dramatically accuses the boy of insulting her family's prestige and wealth. Rowena shames the boy for implying her family is poor, causing him to frantically stammer an excuse. Rowena fiercely defends Arkid, accusing the boy of taking a cheap shot at her husband's background. Overwhelmed by Rowena's fierce defense, the humbled boy is forced to offer a tense apology. A moment of internal tension arises as Rowena worries about the festive mood being ruined. Rowena quickly shifts gears, announcing that she has a grander purpose behind bringing the game. The maid arrives with a cart laden with beautifully crafted, luxurious boxes for the guests. Rowena reveals luxurious gemstone sets as parting gifts, leaving her snobbish critic completely dumbfounded by her generosity. With a sweet smile, Rowena pointedly excludes the arrogant boy from receiving the precious gemstone gifts. The festive atmosphere recovers as Rowena confidently plays the game with her newly won companions. Arkid commends her impressive skills, prompting a flustered Rowena to claim she is just a fast learner. Chibi Arkid asks if she learned from the maids, and she playfully accuses them of hoarding the fun. Arkid expresses genuine happiness at her warm relationship with the household staff, touching her deeply. Rowena boldly suggests sharing a bed with Arkid to get closer, leaving him utterly shocked. Flustered by her forward suggestion, Arkid shyly looks down as Rowena watches him with amusement. Nearby guests begin discussing the ongoing seed sowing festival, immediately catching Rowena's keen attention. Guest enthusiastically describes the breathtaking beauty of the floating seed lanterns at the festival. The guests marvel at the Hedelis family's magical artifacts used to guide the festival's floating seeds. Rowena feels proud of her successful idea and secretly wishes to see the spectacular sight firsthand. Noticing her longing look, Arkid gently asks if she would like to attend the festival. Rowena declines out of concern for her flower allergy, but Arkid offers a reassuring alternative. Arkid suggests a secluded spot where they can safely enjoy the spectacular festival from a distance. Rowena is completely stunned by Arkid's thoughtful invitation to watch the festival together. Rowena's heart races as she realizes Arkid has just asked her out on a date. Fearing he might retract the offer, Rowena eagerly jumps up to accept his invitation. Rowena is overcome with pure bliss and excitement at the prospect of their upcoming date. The scene transitions to a lavish spread of delicious desserts set for a family tea. The Grand Duke questions Rowena about her sudden, massive purchase of bulk gemstones. Rowena looks up from her slice of strawberry cake, utterly bewildered by her father's inquiry. The Grand Duke explains the game's actual name to the curious Grand Duchess. Chibi Rowena cheerfully explains the rising popularity of the commoner game she introduced. The Grand Duke makes a typical aristocratic remark about commoners being unable to afford gemstones. The Grand Duke teases Rowena for using small gems, prompting her to defensively protest his stinginess claim. Rowena dramatically gestures to prepare for a demonstration to prove her point. Rowena triumphantly explains that the gemstone size was chosen perfectly for children's small hands. The Grand Duke smirks, thoroughly amused by his daughter's spirited defense of her choice. Intrigued by her explanation, the Grand Duke asks her to demonstrate how to play. Rowena hesitates for a moment, formulating a playful plan to get the family involved. Rowena enthusiastically nominates a startled Arkid to teach her father how to play. As Argo hesitates in surprise, Rowena nudges him forward, eager to break the family's stiff dynamic. Rowena proposes a team match with a wager, which the Grand Duchess immediately rejects. Rowena cleverly goads her parents by accusing them of being afraid to lose to children. Succumbing to her deliberate baiting, her father confidently accepts the challenge and the wager. The competitive Grand Duchess warns them not to cry, while Rowena celebrates her successful manipulation. The carriage rolls along a scenic path as Rowena mentally criticizes the adults who took the game too seriously. Fuming in her chibi form, Rowena gets worked up remembering her opponent's boastful attitude after winning. Inside the carriage, Arkid warmly remarks on how fun it was, while Rowena credits the festival's lively atmosphere. Looking down at his hands, Arkid softly reflects on this being his first shared activity with both parents. Arkid wears a gentle, peaceful smile, feeling a profound sense of happiness and comfort. Holding his hand, Rowena reassuringly promises that they will share many more joyful moments together. The carriage stops and the young couple stands on a grassy cliff overlooking the brightly lit town. Staring at Arkid under the glowing sky, Rowena gasps internally, wishing she had a camera to preserve his beauty. Confused by her intense gaze, Arkid asks if something is on his face, leaving Rowena flustered and blushing. In chibi form, Arkid asks why she is staring, while a red-faced Rowena tries to look away. Arkid looks back at her with a gentle, incredibly charming smile that completely captivates Rowena. Claiming there is no reason for her staring, Rowena stands with Arkid as colorful lanterns float into the sky. Rowena tentatively peeks into the grand drawing room, wondering why she was suddenly summoned after the festival. The Grand Duchess waves dismissively, instructing Rowena to take a container left on the table. Rowena is completely stunned to find a beautifully decorated chest overflowing with solid gold bars. The Grand Duchess explains that this treasure is Rowena's commission for her brilliant seed sky lantern idea. The Grand Duchess dryly remarks that Rowena likely didn't expect this, given it was her first official duty. A shower of sparkling gold coins underscores the explanation of the estate's policy on rewarding profitable ideas. In a burst of pure joy, Rowena excitedly wonders if she will receive lifetime commissions for her ideas. Clutching the chest protectively, Rowena asks about its worth, while her mother-in-law notes her lack of financial experience. In chibi form, the Grand Duchess reveals that even more gold chest rewards await in Rowena's private vault. Rowena slams her hands on the table, her eyes transforming into dollar signs at the thought of more wealth. Under a clear blue sky, Rowena passionately resolves to utilize her newly acquired fortune for her fandom goals. A warm, fresh stream of dark tea pours gracefully from a white teapot into a delicate teacup. In his quiet study, a brown-haired scholar named Kobe sighs with relief, enjoying a rare moment of peace. A servant suddenly enters the room to announce the arrival of an unexpected guest from the main castle. Kobe points out the Grand Duke's absence, but the servant nervously clarifies that the visitor is actually the Grand Duchess. Kobe does a massive spit take in terror, imagining a menacing, dark shadow of Rowena looming over him. Kobe stares in absolute disbelief, sweat dripping down his face as he braces for the meeting. Anxious thoughts fill the space as Kobe wonders why she is suddenly asking about his well-being. Sitting across from Kobe, Rowena politely explains that she has come to ask him for a favor. Rowena smiles warmly as she reveals she sought him out because he manufactured the sky lanterns, terrifying Kobe. Kobe instantly drops to his hands and knees, loudly begging for forgiveness for his past offenses. Crying tears of pure dread, Kobe desperately promises to do anything within his power to appease her. A silent dark screen transitions the scene as a heavy atmosphere of fear settles in. A dramatic memory shows Rowena furiously blaming and kneeling, panicking Kobe for completely burning her beautiful hair. The memory intensifies as Rowena shouts about the upcoming ball while Kobe begs for a chance to find a solution. Shards of light frame Kobe's overwhelming panic, leaving Rowena to realize just how deeply traumatized he is. Looking at Kobe, Rowena worries that the poor man is still haunted by her predecessor's harsh treatment. Rowena feels a wave of pity for Kobe, comparing his exhausted state to that of an overworked office worker. Reaching out, a hand prepares to deliver a surprising gesture of peace and appreciation. Rowena hands a heavy gold bar to Kobe, explaining she wants to compensate him for working overtime. Kobe insists that working excessive hours is completely normal, leaving Rowena thoroughly shocked and appalled. In chibi form, Rowena asks if he is always confined to the villa, while Kobe explains his comfortable living arrangements. Rowena reaches out and firmly grabs Kobe's wrist, alarming him with her sudden physical intensity. Outraged on his behalf, Rowena passionately denounces the Grand Duke as a heartless and ruthless employer. Rowena demands to know if he truly works 7 days a week, prompting Kobe to admit his minimal time off. Kobe sweat drops in sheer confusion, unable to understand why she is suddenly so invested in his labor rights. A mischievous, plotting chibi Rowena appears behind her smiling self as she devises a plan to help him. A closing banner featuring a pink-haired woman marks the end of the chapter as the adventure continues. Rowena is utterly shocked to learn Kobe gets only 1 day off every 2 weeks. Deeply moved to tears, Rowena expresses intense sympathy for Kobe's harsh working conditions. Rowena holds Kobe's pale hands, nagging him to take walks and get some sunlight. Chibi Rowena angrily rejects Kobe's claim that his overworked lifestyle is perfectly fine. Rowena stands triumphantly with angel wings, resolved to improve Kobe's labor conditions. Crying tears of absolute gratitude, Kobe praises Rowena as his savior and angel. Rowena passionately vows to show the household what a truly great employer looks like. Rowena sits determinedly on the stairs, staging a silent protest to make her point. A household member gently drapes a heavy ornate cloak over Rowena's shoulders. Hannah the maid urges Rowena not to sit in the cold, offering her blankets. Hannah explains her deep worry, while chibi Rowena jokes about becoming a snowman. Hannah looks completely exasperated by the young madam's relentless stubbornness. Rowena bids Hannah farewell as the maid walks up the grand staircase. A sudden creak sounds as the grand double doors of the mansion slowly swing open. Arkid enters the hall and calls out to Rowena, surprised to see her there. Rowena cheerfully greets Arkid, eagerly asking how his sword training went. Arkid stands before Rowena on the stairs, questioning why she is waiting in the cold. Soft touch sounds as Arkid gently reaches out his hand to Rowena's face. Arkid looks at her with deep concern, expressing worry that she might catch a cold. Chibi Rowena is completely overwhelmed and flustered by Arkid's sweet, caring gesture. Arkid asks if she was waiting for him, and Rowena shyly admits she was indeed. Arkid wonders why she waited so long, prompting a playful, teasing response from Rowena. Rowena smiles warmly with her hands on her cheeks, basking in his attention. Arkid looks away slightly blushing, completely captivated by her charming, bright smile. The household butler arrives to deliver urgent news regarding the Grand Duke. The butler explains to Rowena and Arkid that the Grand Duke cannot return tonight. The butler clarifies that an unexpected obstacle occurred during the Grand Duke's journey home. Butler explains that a sudden volcanic eruption has forced the Grand Duke to stay at a hotel. Chibi Rowena screams in shock, utterly stunned by the dramatic news of the eruption. The scene shifts to the snowy landscape of the frozen mountain hotel where the Duke stays. A hand holds a sealed letter bearing the official mark of Hadeler's castle. The Grand Duchess carefully reads the letter, checking on the children's status. The letter highly praises Arkid's impressive management of the castle in their absence. The Grand Duchess suspects the writer is simply bragging about Arkid's accomplishments. A brief fantasy shows a cheerful Rowena clinging tightly to Arkid's arm amidst roses. A quiet creak sounds as Grand Duke Damien opens the door to her bedroom. The Grand Duchess questions Damien's sudden arrival, demanding to know what brings him there. Damien complains about her lack of concern for him while she dismisses his complaints as unreasonable. Damien sighs in frustration, rubbing his temple as he anticipates her cold reaction. A dark screen highlights the cold, heavy tension lingering between the estranged couple. The Grand Duchess touches the bedsheet, bitterly questioning his accusation of her being heartless. Glaring with intense red eyes, the Grand Duchess vents her long-standing resentment. Stepping forward, the Grand Duchess demands they openly admit they are worse than strangers. Damien explains he kept his distance only to avoid making her feel uncomfortable. Grabbing Damien's tie, the Grand Duchess fiercely blames him for abandoning her. A painful memory shows the Grand Duchess sitting completely alone on her wedding night. The Grand Duchess mockingly challenges him, asking if they should go to bed right now. Leaning in close, the Grand Duchess mockingly whispers that she can fulfill her duties immediately. Damien recoils in shock and anger, completely flustered by her biting provocation. The Grand Duchess stands alone with crossed arms, watching him go with cold detachment. The Grand Duchess smiles mockingly, noting how uncomfortable the Grand Duke is with her sudden closeness. Rowena notes the heavy snow delaying her parents-in-law's return, while her maid Hana explains last year was dry. Rowena cheerfully muses about the possibility of spirits being involved in the sudden heavy snowfall. A sudden knock sounds as Arkid asks to enter, instantly catching Rowena's delighted attention. Rowena excitedly springs to her feet, eagerly shouting that Arkid is welcome to enter anytime. The grand doors swing open as Arkid steps inside, met by an eager Rowena. Arkid stands dressed in heavy winter outdoor attire, prompting Rowena to look at him curiously. Rowena asks if he is leaving, and Arkid explains he must inspect the eastern coal mine. Rowena realizes, with a hint of loneliness, that she will be the only one left in the capsule. Arkid expresses concern that she has been cooped up inside due to the heavy snow. Rowena excitedly accepts his implicit invitation, eagerly declaring that she was actually getting quite bored. Arkid smiles warmly, expressing his relief and happiness that she is willing to join him. The group arrives at the snowy coal mine, ready to inspect the sudden issue. Rowena feels disappointed, realizing this snowy inspection is far from the romantic date she envisioned. Arkid angrily demands to know why forbidden Delos flowers are growing, terrifying the apologetic manager. The manager claims the flowers appeared suddenly today, but Arkid coldly dismisses it as hot air. A sudden scream of panic escapes Rowena as she realizes these flowers pose a lethal threat. Arkid strictly questions how such a massive cluster of flowers could have been missed. Arkid glares sternly at the manager, who trembles nervously under his intense scrutiny. The manager desperately defends himself, but Arkid firmly commands him to stop making excuses. Arkid cold-bloodedly vows to hold him accountable later, plunging the manager into absolute dread. Rowena observes the distressed manager, noting that he looks utterly devastated by the unfair situation. Rowena feels absolutely no sympathy for the manager, remembering her own life-threatening allergy. A gentle hand reaches out to guide Rowena safely away from the dangerous flowers. Arkid advises Rowena to stay indoors, prompting her to complain about being cooped up again. Arkid hesitates with worry, while Rowena realizes she must keep her secret flower allergy hidden. Narration reveals Rowena's allergy is highly classified as it conflicts with the territory's symbolic flower. The memory highlights how her allergy was considered a massive defect for a future duchess. Rowena reassures Arkid, suggesting she can simply cover her face with a handkerchief. Rowena happily presses a lace handkerchief over her nose and mouth to reassure him. Rowena gasps in awe at the glowing cavern, which the manager explains indicates high-purity mana stones. Arkid questions how this massive deposit went unnoticed, which the manager attributes to a snow-induced sinkhole. Rowena connects this to a legendary spirit-blessed mine owned by the Grand Duchess in the novel. Arkid suspects the workers hid the find to embezzle, which the terrified manager frantically denies. Arkid demands to review the past 3 months of logs, firmly silencing the manager's hesitation. Arkid asserts that a thorough record review is simply standard procedure under the circumstances. The manager reluctantly leads the way, while Rowena swoons over Arkid's impressive, meticulous nature. Narration underscores how highly suspicious it is that a cave of this scale went unnoticed. Rowena is suddenly startled as she feels an unusual sensation near the glowing crystals. A sudden scream echoes as Rowena is pulled downward by an invisible force, shocking Arkid. Arkid desperately runs to the edge as Rowena falls deep into the glowing blue abyss. A hand reaches out desperately in a futile attempt to catch her. Rowena's hand stretches upward in vain as she slips further away into the light. Arkid is gripped by absolute horror and panic at her sudden, terrifying disappearance. Arkid's voice echoes in sheer panic as Rowena continues her rapid descent down the tunnel. Whispering voices debate what to do with Rowena, who groggily wonders where she has landed. Rowena wakes up and is horrified to find herself lying directly on dangerous Delos flowers. Rowena screams in terror and scrambles backward as glowing white butterflies flutter around her. Rowena fearfully demands to know who is speaking, surprising the mysterious entities who realize she can hear them. Rowena asks if the butterfly is talking, but the glowing creature clarifies that they are actually spirits. The pink-haired butterfly spirit cheerfully introduces itself and its kind to the startled human. Chibi Rowena lets out a comical shriek of utter shock at the sudden revelation. The tiny spirit hovers close to Rowena's cheek, begging to see her covered face. Rowena frantically backs away, explaining her life-threatening allergy to Delos flowers to the surprised spirit. Narration explains the true origin of magic as Rowena recalls her painful childhood struggle with absorbing mana. The green-haired spirit giggles at Rowena's fear, playfully asking if she is currently in pain. Rowena realizes she feels perfectly fine, while the spirits explain her body has finally adapted to the mana. The pink-haired spirit marvels at Rowena's incredibly rare and rich constitution. The spirit's face turns playfully sinister as it expresses a strong desire to form a contract, terrifying Rowena. Rowena questions the benefits of a contract, learning it allows her to purify contaminated land. Narration notes that while land pollution is currently rare, a devastating blight is destined to begin soon. A sudden vision of the novel's original main characters prompts a realization in Rowena's mind. Rowena clenches her fist with a determined look, imagining her potential future as a legendary spirit summoner. Blinding light highlights her hope that becoming a summoner will completely change her tragic fate. Back in the mine, a heavy slamming sound echoes as Arkid punches a wall in absolute frustration over her disappearance. A concerned guard urges the exhausted young duke to take a moment and rest outside. Arkid turns back with furious intensity, stating he cannot relax while his wife's life is in danger. Guilt heavily weighs on Arkid's mind as he deeply regrets asking her to accompany him. Arkid covers his face in absolute despair, completely overwhelmed by his own self-blame. A somber thought highlights how Rowena was the very first person to truly believe in him. Arkid remembers her bright, loving smile, fearing what his life would become if she were to vanish forever. His boots stumble softly on the cold stone, reflecting his physical exhaustion and despair. Rowena's voice suddenly cuts through the gloom, prompting him to look up and see her safe. Arkid stares in absolute shock and disbelief as her name escapes his lips. Rapid footsteps patter softly as he rushes to her side. Rowena looks at him in surprise as he tightly clutches her sleeve, seeking reassurance of her safety. Rowena notes how heavily he is sweating, while Arkid emotionally explains he couldn't stay still after her disappearance. Gently touching her face, Arkid admits his terror of losing her, deeply touching Rowena with his concern. Rowena smiles warmly, deeply touched by the sheer depth of his worry for her. In a playful moment, Rowena cheekily pokes his face while the guards sweat drop in the background. Arkid bashfully turns away to hide his blush while Rowena giggles behind him. Rowena scolds the spirits for not warning her about the time, but they dismiss her complaints as impatience. A glowing spirit teasingly asks if the handsome young man is her husband, noting her high standards. Flustered and blushing furiously, Rowena commands the spirits to disperse as Arkid calls her name. Arkid recommends they leave the dangerous mine immediately, raising Rowena's curiosity. Arkid points out that the mysterious flowers suddenly bloomed and vanished, posing an unpredictable threat. Rowena happily praises her husband's sharp intuition, agreeing that they should head back to their lodgings. The scene shifts to the exterior of the snow-covered hotel during the heavy storm. A hand holds an envelope as a voice comments on a remarkably bold proposal. The Grand Duchess smiles mockingly as she reads the secret correspondence in her room. She recalls the legend of a spirit that could fertilize dry land, resolving to keep the mine from Damien. A crisp, sharp knock sounds against the wooden door. Damien stands elegantly in the doorway, waiting for his wife's permission to enter. Damien informs the seated Duchess that they can return to the castle tomorrow once the snow is cleared. The Duchess questions why he delivers news in person instead of sending a servant, met by his silent gaze. Damien inquires about her frequent correspondence, noting her tense reaction when he mentions her letters. Damien bluntly asks if she has found a lover, shocking her into stunned silence. The Duchess scoffs in disbelief, utterly amazed by his ridiculous accusation. Standing up defiantly, the Duchess challenges his double standards, though Damien remains indifferent to her choices. Quiet footsteps click against the floor as she coldly commands him to be silent and walks away. The blonde Duchess furiously pushes her husband away, angrily declaring she is nothing like him. She coldly tells him to pursue romance elsewhere to his heart's content. She slams the door shut, declaring her absolute lack of interest in romance. Outside the room, his hand trembles slightly in response to her harsh rejection. Leaning against the locked door, he despondently laments his own foolishness for pushing her away. As night deepens, a messenger bird flies away from the silent mansion under the moon. A secret correspondence reveals a willingness to agree to conditions if the terms are true. The letter demands proof of a spirit's blessing before returning to the castle. Rowena intensely analyzes the letter, confirming the exact conditions written on the parchment. Flopping onto the sofa, she celebrates that a deal is finally within her grasp. Her gaze sharpens with intense determination as she plots her next moves. She asks the floating spirit if simply proving their existence is the key. The spirit refuses to reveal itself to others, leaving Rowena confused by its sudden secrecy. The spirit warns that revealing their magical contract would place her in grave danger. The spirit notes that understanding a summoner's power would make the danger obvious. Rowena learns ancient summoners worked in groups, prompting her to worry about her own limitations. She accuses the spirit of running a scam, but the spirit insists that's only the general rule. Since she is the sole summoner of this era, she realizes she holds a monopoly on all the power. Thrilled by her immense strength, she wonders why she must hide such a heralded gift. The spirit cryptically warns that the dark truth behind the summoner's disappearance demands secrecy. With a somber gaze, the spirit admits it cannot bear to lose another contractor. Surprised by the sudden gravity, she realizes there is more to spirits than idle chatter. Shifting the mood, the spirit suggests there are other clever ways to persuade him. She thoughtfully considers a certain scholar who might help her find the necessary proof. A memory reveals a passionate scholar who once successfully verified a mind's spirit blessing. A clever smirk plays on her lips as she senses a lucrative opportunity approaching. She ecstatically imagines the sheer volume of wealth about to rain down on her. Rowena skeptically eyes a peculiar stone, questioning if they have any better evidence. She complains that the evidence resembles a bear paw, deeply offending the tiny green spirit. Spirit defends its magical dust, but she demands more glitter to look convincing. The spirit sarcastically suggests stomping on it physically, which she eagerly finds brilliant. Terrified by her schemes, the spirits huddle together while she playfully dismisses her threats. Dressed for travel, she wonders if the eccentric scholar has caught wind of the rumors yet. In a quiet tavern, the dejected scholar laments never once witnessing a real spirit. Despite his lack of success, his unwavering faith keeps him believing in their existence. He vows to see a spirit before dying, prompting concern from the nearby bartender. Patrons discuss the mine's closure, noting everyone panicked when the Duchess briefly went missing. A patron reveals that during the frantic search, she was busy uncovering a strange artifact. The patron explains that the dug-up rock supposedly bears an authentic spirit footprint fossil. Loud crash echoes through the tavern as the stunned scholar drops his mug. He bolsters forward, aggressively grabbing the startled patron's shoulder to demand more information. With crazed excitement in his eyes, he frantically asks him to repeat the rumor. As he rushes outside to find her, protective guards instantly draw their weapons. Raising his hands defensively, the scholar frantically identifies himself as Henry Cowher. He explains that his only desire is to ask the Duchess a critical question. Rowena recognizes his name and asks his business, prompting him to inquire about the fossil. Trying to make a favorable impression, he displays an overly polite, charming smile. Her cold indifference to his request leaves him utterly speechless and devastated. He desperately pleads for a chance, while she silently critiques his lack of social skills. She points out the rudeness of requesting favors empty-handed, prompting him to quickly offer money. Stopping the scholar in his tracks, the red-haired woman calls out for him to wait. Rowena demands the unique pocket watch on his hip in exchange for showing him the legendary spirit fossil. Rowena beams confidently as she presents her transaction amidst a sea of bright sunflowers. The confused scholar hesitantly explains that his pocket watch is not used for telling time. Rowena stubbornly dismisses his protest, insisting she only cares about its appealing design. The scholar reluctantly yields to her status and agrees to hand over the watch. He agrees to show her the promised fossil as they walk together. The scene transitions to the quiet exterior of a grand estate under cloudy skies. Arkad eyes the guest with deep suspicion, noting he has never heard of his family name. Rowena reassures her husband of the scholar's trustworthiness and demands the watch while Henry hesitates. Henry explains again that the watch is unique, prompting Arkad to ask about its purpose. The scholar explains that the device detects a spirit's blessing when activated. A sudden, crisp click sounds as he presses down on the pocket watch. The device begins ringing wildly, shocking the scholar who wonders if it is broken, as a spirit playfully remarks on the presence of real spirits. The scholar marvels at the spirit's appearance while the fairy eagerly eyes the dried flower powder inside the device. The green spirit hungrily contemplates the taste of the powder, while Rowena notes their extreme fondness for it. Rowena commends the scholar's devotion for carrying such a specialized spiritual device. Henry passionately explains his fascination with spirits, noting their enduring legends and a joke the mine manager once made. Rowena looks thoughtful as the scholar asks if something occurred at the mine. Arkid lists the strange events, such as flowers suddenly blooming and then vanishing completely. Arkid warns that ghost rumors might ruin the mine, causing Rowena to panic over her potential losses. The scholar stands up abruptly, vehemently denying that a ghost is behind the occurrences. Arkid questions his certainty, prompting Henry to ask for permission to pose more questions first. Rowena rejoices inwardly, realizing this situation presents a perfect opportunity for her family's fortune. A soft clinking sound echoes as a spoon gently stirs the hot dark coffee. The Grand Duchess and her husband sit quietly at a finely set tea table. Damien questions her sudden interest in the mine, noting its long-term lack of profitability. The Grand Duchess dismisses his concern, explaining she has a project she wishes to start. She reminds him she is paying market value, leaving him in tense, hesitant silence. Damien offers a sincere apology for his previous reckless accusations, surprising his wife. He expresses deep regret for uttering words that should have remained unsaid. The Duchess requests they finalize the paperwork immediately, prompting Damien to chuckle at her businesslike attitude. Standing up, Damien agrees to have the documents delivered by the end of the day. As he turns to leave, Damien stops to share some additional information with her. Blushing base, Damien insists that she must not receive correspondence from any other man. Pacing his room, Damien is stunned to realize the mysterious letter was from his wife. Damien asks his servant if they have received any message or letters from Arkid. The servant sweat drops and confirms that there has been absolutely no contact. The cold wind howls across the snow-capped mountains surrounding the Grand Winter Mansion. Rowena looks thoughtful as she reads a letter sent to her by the Grand Duke. The letter reveals the Grand Duke's complaints about her lack of communication, which she describes as whining. With a sigh, Rowena prepares to write a response for the sake of her husband. She wonders who is visiting her since her husband is currently away at the mine. Henry arrives excitedly, eager to share some highly anticipated news with her. Rowena gasps in surprise upon hearing they have already received a response from the Imperial Palace. An ornate chest overflows with brilliant glowing magical crystals under fluttering light butterflies. Rowena marvels at the incredible speed with which the Imperial Palace reacted to their meeting. Henry confirms that an Imperial delegation is on its way, reinforcing how quickly spirit-related matters are prioritized. Rowena excitedly anticipates the massive fortune and heavy pockets coming their way. Abundant cartloads of glowing mana stones stand as solid proof of the spirit's miraculous blessing. Richard marvels at the incredible power and miraculous nature of the spirit's blessing. Rowena runs forward calling out to Arkid, but is startled when his device begins to ring loudly. The spiritual pocket watch suddenly cracks, leaking colorful magical dust from its broken screen. Arkid is left completely stunned, holding the broken device and wondering if it is simply broken. But the purple-haired fairy greedily licks the powder, remarking that it tastes exactly like a Dendalis flower. Rowena quickly brushes the dust off the device to hide the evidence, prompting the fairy to complain about the rough treatment. Rowena sighs in relief at their narrow escape, only to freeze when Arkid suddenly calls her name. Arkid asks if she arrived to greet him, causing Rowena to blush and gush over how cute he looks. Rowena enthusiastically mentions some news, prompting a confused reaction from Arkid. The scholar Henry Connor enthusiastically takes charge, declaring they are ready to return to the castle immediately. Arkid questions if she traveled so far just for this, and she shyly admits she wanted to tell him as soon as possible. Concerned by the winter cold, Arkid holds her face and suggests she should have stayed warm inside the hotel. Arkid slowly reaches up to unwind the warm white scarf from around his neck. Arkid wraps his scarf around her to keep her warm, leaving her swooning over his comforting scent. Rowena shyly hints that her hands are cold too, causing the mischievous fairy to tease her for making a bold move. Arkid smiles warmly, agreeing that the weather is indeed exceptionally cold today. Arkid holds her hand with a gentle smile, asking if they are ready to depart. Rowena stands frozen in place, her face flushing bright red with sudden romantic embarrassment. Her mind races with sudden panic, wondering if Arkid is secretly highly experienced in romance. The mansion staff gather outside to welcome the Grand Duchess back from her long journey. Vivian, the dark blue-haired maid, beams happily as she warmly welcomes her mistress home. Rowena asks if Vivian has been well, prompting the maid to curiously ask about the document she holds. Rowena proudly displays the research contract, jokingly referring to her new scholar as a highly trusted aide. Rowena smiles slyly, wondering if she should recruit even more helpful aides for her grand projects. Sitting in the grand parlor, Rowena warmly welcomes her exhausted scholar, Sir Kobe Stein, back from his travels. Gobistein notes her urgent summons, and Rowena seriously replies that she has a highly important matter to discuss. Rowena presents a glowing voucher, proudly announcing she secured official permission for him to take a vacation. Rowena explains she personally wrote a letter to secure his leave, leaving his assistant completely dumbfounded by the gesture. The glowing document is revealed to be a luxurious, highly coveted vacation voucher for the Year Hotel. The Grand 5-star hotel is extremely exclusive, normally requiring a reservation an entire year in advance. Overwhelmed with disbelief, the assistant frantically grabs Gobistein, who desperately begs to be let go. Rowena smugly reveals her family owns the hotel, prompting the assistant to realize they secured the Grand Duchess's private suite. The assistant tearfully begs to be sneaked along in his luggage, but Gobistein instantly rejects her request. Standing in the courtyard, Rowena presents a grand carriage she prepared to ensure he travels in complete luxury. Gobistein humbly suggests riding a horse instead, but Rowena insists that traveling such a long distance that way is out of the question. Gobistein emotionally wonders how he can ever repay her, but Rowena kindly tells him not to feel burdened. Rowena beams with a dazzling, joyous smile amidst a field of brilliant yellow flowers. Gobistein stares at her in absolute awe, his eyes sparkling with deep gratitude and admiration. Rowena celebrates her triumph internally, proud of herself for successfully securing her target's absolute loyalty. A brown-haired maid admits her jealousy over the luxury vacation, wondering how the young masters are currently doing. The maid reassures Rowena that the young masters truly adored her, though Rowena reacts with skeptical confusion. The maid warmly emphasizes that the young masters deeply miss her and wish for her return. Rowena becomes thoughtful as she ponders the maid's question regarding her feelings about the notorious April twins. The narrative introduces the twins, Eliezer with his athletic build and Kyle with his cold intellectual charm. She recalls their difficult personalities, recognizing their twisted affection for her sister as a coping mechanism for their lost sibling. The brown-haired maid abruptly shifts the conversation back to the pressing matters at hand. The maid shares the news that her mother and father are returning, suggesting they prepare the mansion. Rowena stands excitedly with her arms wide open, ready to plan a grand welcoming ceremony. Upon hearing the servants will line up formally, Rowena dismisses the plan as being far too stiff. A bright light bulb pops up above Chibi Rowena's head as she devises a clever new plan. Rowena mischievously plans a special welcome, leaving her brown-haired maid thoroughly confused. Damien and Elena return home together, greeted by a sudden shower of pink flower petals. Maids applaud and cheer while Rowena and Akid hold up welcoming placards on the stairs. Rowena enthusiastically displays an embarrassingly flattering sign dedicated to her beautiful mother. Elena is utterly flabbergasted by the dramatic display while Damien barely holds back his laughter. Akid presents a sign praising Damien's charm, prompting Elena to burst into giggles. Elena notes the unprecedented welcome while Rowena quickly prompts Akid to present his gift. Akid nervously presents a beautiful pink and white bouquet while blushing intensely. Elena gazes at the boy with a look of warm, quiet affection and gentle surprise. Akid looks down shyly, still clutching the beautiful bouquet in his hands. Elena warmly accepts the floral gift, bringing a gentle smile to everyone present. Elena embraces both children with deep affection, politely asking them not to repeat the display. The brown-haired maid praises Rowena's creativity, thoroughly impressed by the unique welcome plan. The maids swoon over how adorable the children looked, making Rowena swell with playful pride. Rowena phonetically regrets not bringing an artist to document Akid's adorable embarrassment, confusing her maid. Rowena schemes her next recording stone project before a sudden clattering noise outside distracts her. Looking out the window, Rowena notes the bustling staff preparing diligently for the upcoming banquet. Rowena recalls the imperial delegation's arrival, wondering why they were lent the entire private villa. A mysterious voice explains that their deep connection stems from the shared contract they made. Fairy explains that the contract allows them to easily manifest and track spiritual traces. Another small fairy clarifies the slow natural process required for spiritual residue to crystallize. Rowena excitedly views the spirits as a gold mine, earning a playful scolding before being interrupted. Elena stands elegantly dressed in her fine gown, radiating a calm, sophisticated beauty. Rowena's jaw drops as she spots her mother walking hand-in-hand with an unfamiliar gentleman. The handsome light brown-haired nobleman smiles warmly as he escorts Elena down the stone path. Elena introduces the man as Duke Douglas Ethel, leaving Rowena completely frozen in absolute shock. Rowena internally panics upon realizing this charming man belongs to the family of the notorious villainess. Duke Douglas friendly greets Rowena, mentioning how highly Elena has spoken of her accomplishments. Elena bashfully downplays her praises, much to Rowena's surprise and confusion about her mother's actions. Douglas gently teases Elena, reminding her of Rowena's impressive feats during the recent festival. Rowena stands amidst blooming white flowers, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the sudden attention and praise. Douglas laments his sister's hazardous horse riding obsession, leaving Rowena feeling highly skeptical about her. Elena kindly offers to prepare healing ointment, prompting Douglas to praise her deep understanding of Kathy. Elena playfully retorts that she fell off her horse far less than Douglas did in the past. Rowena observes their intimate banter, wondering if they shared a close history. Rowena deduces they were close in the capital, wondering how the Grand Duke fits in. Damien suddenly joins them, asking about their lively conversation and catching Douglas off guard. Damien stands majestically, exuding a stern, commanding presence that instantly shifts the lighthearted atmosphere. Rowena asks if he was walking, and Damien signs wearily while confirming his brief excursion. Damien grumbles internally about feeling even more exhausted after attempting to take a relaxing walk. Damien formally inquires if Douglas has encountered any discomforts during his stay at the villa. Douglas complains about missing letters, while Damien sharply questions writing to a married woman, sparking tension. Douglas defends his pure friendship, cheekily suggesting that only a guilty conscience would find offense. The men bicker over childhood jealousy until Elena suddenly covers Rowena's eyes to shield her. Elena halts the bickering to protect her daughter, though Rowena desperately begs to watch the drama. Elena directly confronts Damien about her letters, which he sheepishly claims was merely an accident. Elena demands the return of her letters, only for Damien to casually admit he burned them. Elena dryly questions the selective burning of Douglas's letters, which Damien shamelessly brushes off. When Damien asks if she considers him petty over an old incident, Elena instantly answers yes. Damien proudly confesses his lingering pettiness, leaving Elena unsurprised by his childish but honest admission. Duke Douglas politely bids farewell to the ladies as he prepares to take his leave. Duke Douglas warmly promises to introduce his daughter if they ever decide to visit the capital. Hearing Duke Douglas praise his daughter, Rowena panics internally at the thought of befriending the future villainess. As Duke Douglas walks away, Rowena resolves to avoid getting entangled with his dangerous family. Damien tiresomely complains about his aching legs to his family, looking for some sympathy. Elena coldly rejects Damien's offer to escort her, leaving him rejected while Rowena praises her mother's resolve. The scene shifts to a peaceful sunlit greenhouse conservatory filled with lush green plants. Inside the glass house, Damien cuts a delicious strawberry cake while sitting across from Rowena. A gentle clink sounds as Damien slices the dessert while calling Rowena's name. Damien sighs wearily, noting that the Grand Duchess appears to be quite angry with him. Rowena dismisses his worries internally, wishing he would serve her the cake before complaining. Damien muses that Elena has been avoiding him, leaving Rowena baffled by his slow realization. Damien blames his burning of Duke Douglas's letters, prompting Rowena to wonder why he is bringing it up. A soft slide sounds as Damien presents the sweet treat, eliciting a delighted squeal from Rowena as he prepares to ask a favor. With a swift whoosh, Damien passes the plate over to a very receptive Rowena. A heavy thump of dramatic tension sounds as Damien solemnly requests that Rowena spy on Duke Douglas for him. Damien explains that the Duke seems unusually soft on Rowena, hoping to use that to their advantage. A sharp slap sounds as Damien slams down a fancy book, causing Rowena to gasp in sudden recognition. Rowena instantly recognizes her precious diary containing all her painstakingly gathered secrets about young Akid's life. Rowena politely claims she was searching for the book while internally screaming in absolute terror over how he obtained it. With a quick swish, Damien snatches the diary away, teasingly declaring finders keepers as Rowena tries to grab it back. Damien shamelessly claims ownership of the book, driving Rowena to absolute exasperation over his childish personality. Damien proposes a deal to return her diary only after Duke Douglas departs, forcing a reluctant negotiation. Rowena battles dark, murderous thoughts as Damien smugly reiterates his temporary ownership of her book. With a defeated sigh, Rowena finally surrenders and accepts his terms under duress. Rowena gears up as a cute detective, finding the task of keeping watch over the Duke quite simple. Her extensive experience shadowing Akid makes tracking Duke Douglas's everyday movements a total breeze. The scene transitions to a cozy tea room decorated with beautiful pink tulips. Rowena reports back to Damien, revealing that Duke Douglas won the chess game and tied their score. A soft brush sounds as Damien sweeps his hair back, competitively offering to play chess with Rowena instead. Rowena playfully taunts Damien, predicting he will throw a childish tantrum if she manages to beat him. Rowena admits she cannot stay angry at Damien simply because his face looks exactly like her beloved Akid. Rowena astutely deduces that the spying mission is just a petty excuse to prevent Duke Douglas from being alone with Elena. Damien dismissively argues that he and Elena were historically much closer, reacting defensively to her observation. Damien dryly retorts as Rowena continues to tease him about Elena being more comfortable around Duke Douglas. Damien sighs and patronizingly questions how a mere child could ever comprehend the complex affairs of adults. A loud slurp sounds as Rowena sips her tea, left wondering if the two actually got along in the past. Rowena remains deeply puzzled, trying to piece together the truth about her parents' history. Under a shady tree in the garden, Rowena sits peacefully while Vivian arranges fresh flowers. Rowena holds a bright orange rose, admiring its beauty while lost in her thoughts. Rowena proudly reminds herself of her noble duty to master diverse social and artistic refinements. Vivian teasingly accuses Rowena of waiting for the young master, causing Rowena to scream in absolute embarrassment. A sharp prick sounds as Rowena accidentally hurts her hand on some rose thorns while bickering with Vivian. Rowena blames Vivian for not warning her faster while nursing her newly injured finger. A rapid patter of footsteps sounds as Vivian quickly runs off to fetch some healing ointment. A soft rustle sounds as a sudden voice calls out Rowena's name, catching her off guard. Quick patter of running footsteps sounds as Akid dashes over, frantically asking if she is hurt. Akid gently cradles her hand, deeply concerned by the amount of blood coming from her finger. Rowena is delighted by his sudden assertiveness, swooning over his direct and protective attitude. Rowena shyly asks Akid to blow on her injury to make the pain go away. Akid hesitates momentarily, his blue eyes filled with a gentle, protective concern for Rowena. Her heart beats rapidly in a sweet flutter of excitement as she gazes up. Akid gently cradles her hand and asks if her injury feels any better now. Rowena dramatically swoons in sheer excitement, convinced that his adorable charm will be her ultimate undoing. Vivian runs over with the ointment, surprised to find Akid keeping company with Rowena in the garden. Akid turns and offers a warm, polite greeting to Vivian as she arrives with the medicine. Rowena observes their interaction, surprised and slightly intrigued by how familiar Akid has become with her maid. A sharp prick of pain causes Rowena to scream loudly as the stinging ointment is applied to her finger. Rowena tearfully complains about the intense sting, but Vivian reassuringly promises that the pain will fade quickly. Vivian playfully points out that injuries only happen when the medicine is forgotten, earning a dry retort from Rowena. Akid thoughtfully offers to start carrying the healing ointment himself to ensure she is always protected. Rowena instantly ecstatically agrees, her eyes sparkling with pure joy at his sweet and caring proposition. Rowena happily daydreams that she would gladly endure scraped knees if it meant Akid would always tend to her. Rowena cheerfully calls out to Akid as she spots him arriving in the bright garden. Rowena asks Akid about his participation in the upcoming weekend archery contest with Duke Ethel, which he confirms. Akid warmly invites Rowena to attend and watch the competition if she has any free time. A loud scrape sounds as Rowena eagerly leaps up, declaring that she would never miss watching him compete. Rowena excitedly reveals that she prepared a handmade handkerchief for him, leaving Akid genuinely surprised by her effort. Rowena explains how she diligently worked on the embroidery every day, even though she repeatedly pricked her fingers. Rowena beams with absolute pride as she presents the beautifully wrapped gift box to Akid. With a powerful snap, Akid draws his bowstring back, focusing intently on his target. A solid thud echoes as the arrow flies straight and strikes the wooden target. The purple-haired knight warmly praises Akid's impressive shot, noting it is exactly what he expected from the Crown Prince. The elegant purple-haired man is officially introduced as Ethan, the esteemed vice-captain of the Howdless Knight Order. Akid humbly dismisses the high praise, stating that he still has a long way to go to surpass his father. Ethan silently recalls his initial worries when he was first appointed as Akid's swordsmanship instructor by the Grand Duke. Ethan internally marvels at Akid's sturdy physical foundation and solid fundamentals, confidently predicting he will become a legendary family head. Ethan aloud agrees, noting that the Grand Duke was also renowned for his exceptional archery skills during his youth. Akid smiles with absolute confidence, declaring that he will surely win as long as he has his special charm. Ethan looks at the embroidered handkerchief wrapped around Akid's wrist, wondering if it serves as some lucky talisman. Akid proudly displays his wrist, joyfully explaining that the handkerchief is the very first gift from his wife. Ethan dismisses the negative rumors about their marriage and heartily encourages Akid to secure the first-place victory. Akid enthusiastically vows to do exactly that, his eyes shining with pure determination and hope. The majestic flags flutter proudly against the clear blue sky, signaling the start of the tournament. A roaring cheer echoes through the massive arena as the highly anticipated tournament finally begins. Rowena eagerly waits for Akid's entrance, but gasps in shock as she spots an unexpected participant entering the field. Rowena is left completely stunned upon realizing that her elegant mother-in-law is standing on the tournament field. Her companion explains that the Grand Duchess has always loved archery, preparing to whisper a scandalous rumor. Rowena shudders at the terrifying rumor of the Grand Duchess using her enemies for apple target practice. Rowena reacts with absolute wonder and excitement, completely thrilled by the legendary prowess of her mother-in-law. Rowena's attention is suddenly drawn back to the field as she spots Akid finally stepping out. Akid warmly smiles up at Rowena while tapping the embroidered handkerchief wrapped around his wrist. Rowena dramatically clutches her heart as if struck by Cupid's arrow, deeply touched by his public display. Glad that she hired artists beforehand, Rowena frantically orders them to quickly paint the heartwarming scene. The elegant Grand Duchess stands in the archway, holding her bow as she prepares to compete. The blonde Grand Duchess gazes forward with a calm, stoic intensity before the upcoming match. Deep voice from behind gently advises her not to overexert herself during the stressful archery match. The Grand Duchess turns to find a tall, brown-haired nobleman standing closely behind her. The brown-haired nobleman directly suggests that it would be far better if she simply forfeits the match. She coldly rejects his false concern, but he grabs her trembling wrist, pointing out her obvious nervousness. A sharp slap sounds as the blonde Grand Duchess pulls her hand away, declaring she is perfectly fine. The blonde woman coldly tells Damien it is not his place to speak, accusing him of causing her injury. Damien smugly declines to win against an opponent who is not in full health, annoying Elena. A dull thud echoes as Elena forcefully stomps on his foot, wishing he would just drop dead. Damien silently watches her walk away, offering no reply with his hand resting gently on his chest. Rowena cheers enthusiastically for Akid, praising him for his hard work during the archery competition. Akid humbly apologizes for losing, but Rowena points out that his high score is still highly impressive. Akid quietly touches the embroidered lucky handkerchief wrapped around his wrist, reflecting on his performance. Akid explains that he wanted to secure the first-place victory to repay her sweet kindness. Rowena is completely overwhelmed with affection, playfully comparing the adorable Akid to a cute puppy. Rowena reassures him that he fought well, prompting a flustered Akid to ask if he seemed amazing. Akid warmly offers to teach her archery, catching Rowena completely off guard with his sweet proposal. As Akid hesitates, Rowena quickly begs him to teach her, eagerly raising her hands in absolute excitement. Rowena covers her blushing face, deeply embarrassed by how quickly she agreed to his charming offer. Akid beams with a bright smile, leaving Rowena utterly dazed by his sudden shift in attitude. Rowena is left internally screaming in panic, wondering if she has just fallen for Akid's clever act. The family dines in a grand hall under a tense, chilling silence, making Rowena highly uncomfortable. Rowena recalls how the light brown-haired Duke tried to introduce her as a villainess before departing. Rowena internally despairs, noting the chilling family atmosphere made it impossible to ask for her diary back. Rowena bravely raises her hand at the dinner table, announcing she has something to say. The parents fix her with cold, intense glares, telling her to go ahead and speak. Rowena breaks into a nervous cold sweat as she struggles to find her words under pressure. Rowena gathers her courage and shouts her dramatic plea in front of a blooming floral background. A carriage travels through the lush green valley toward a magnificent glowing white temple. Rowena comments on the pleasant weather outside, contrasting with the freezing, hostile atmosphere inside the carriage. Damien notes his surprise at Elena's cooperation, which she attributes to the logic of Akid's advice. Damien reflects that visiting under the pretext of a picnic helps build trust with the temple. Rowena cynically assumes that her own simple wishes hold no value to her stoic mother-in-law. Damien smugly remarks that a daughter-in-law's wish cannot compare to important business, leaving Elena shocked. Elena glares with fierce red eyes, sharply demanding to know what he is trying to say. Damien continues to tease her, expressing pity that Rowena must miss her highly anticipated boat ride. Elena angrily retorts that she is indeed going, while Damien smugly defends his assumption of her behavior. Rowena despairs over the hopeless family dynamic, contemplating running away with young Akid instead. Elena suddenly declares she will ride in the carriage with Rowena on the way back, shocking her. Rowena quickly intervenes, claiming she wants to ride with Lord Akid instead, to everyone's surprise. Damien insists that Akid ride with him, while Rowena mentally protests that the married couple should ride together. Rowena's chibi self sighs, lamenting how incredibly difficult it is to get the two parents to reconcile. A soft click of heels sounds as Rowena walks down a grand hallway alongside her maid. The maid excitedly explains that many ancient ruins and discovered relics are on display in this region. Rowena holds up a map of the ruins that a priest had left behind earlier. The maid offers to check if Lord Akid is ready while Rowena examines the map in her room. Rowena sits peacefully on a large blue bed, quietly reviewing the map by herself. A small fairy suddenly appears and expresses surprise, assuming all of these objects were already gone. The fairy points directly at a drawing of a round, stone-like ball on the paper. A flashback shows hooded dark figures using a glowing purple orb artifact to hatch a divine beast. The pink-haired fairy explains that this artifact was created by dark mages to trap divine beasts. Rowena is left completely stunned, wondering if dark mages were ever mentioned in the original novel. The fairies explain that these vicious mages broke sacred taboos, causing severe suffering to spirit contractors. Rowena asks what kind of taboo they committed, but the fairies admit they lack the details. Fairy sadly reveals that the taboo had something mysterious to do with time itself. Hexagonal panels explain that humans and spirits were completely separated during a terrifying time when the world stopped. Rowena looks on in shock as the pink-haired fairy explains that dark magic causes the world's contamination. Rowena silently wonders if someone used dark magic in the original story and if it is happening now. A sudden, sharp knock sounds as the maid announces that Lord Akid is ready to head out. The pink-haired fairy eagerly reminds a startled Rowena that they must go see the divine beast. The fairy tearfully worries about the beast being trapped, while chibi Rowena tries to calm her down. The energetic pink-haired fairy forces a smiling Rowena to make a pinky promise to hurry up. Akid looks up in surprise, asking Rowena if she wants to visit the museum. Walking through the grand stone courtyard, Rowena suggests visiting the museum, surprising Akid with her interest. Chibi Rowena worries about boring him, but Akid sweetly reassures her he wanted to go too. Rowena happily notes that her father-in-law and mother-in-law are busy with work. A beautiful floral background frames the reminder that the parents are staying until tomorrow. Hand in hand, Rowena and Akid walk happily together through a bright, sparkling hallway. Rowena happily mentions they are on a date, leaving Akid completely flustered and blushing. Two white birds sit on a tree branch as Rowena corrects herself, calling it a family trip. Rowena adorably swoons as she notices a subtle, happy smile forming on Akid's face. Rowena beams with a bright, joyful smile against a soft pink background. Rowena gasps in shock as she wonders if she accidentally spoke her sweet thoughts out loud. Against a blooming floral backdrop, Akid smiles and notes how his parents get in the way. Chibi Rowena panics internally, comparing Akid's unexpectedly bold personality to a black cat. Akid charmingly states he wanted them to be alone, causing Rowena to fall into chibi panic. Chibi Rowena happily gushes over how cute he is while Akid looks slightly exhausted. The carriage driver warmly welcomes them as Akid begins to say something but gets cut off. Akid walks toward the carriage with a slight blush while Rowena watches him with curiosity. Inside the carriage, the young black-haired prince gazes quietly out the window as they travel. A soft heel click echoes as the young couple walks hand in hand through the Grand Museum Hall. Rowena secretly steals a nervous glance out of the corners of her brilliant blue eyes. Under the cover of darkness, Rowena holds Akid's hand tightly, using the dim lighting as an excuse. Chibi Rowena gets flustered by her own romantic thoughts while they walk toward the exhibits. The pink-haired fairy flies ahead, excitedly alerting Rowena that she has found the artifact. Resting on a red cushion, a round golden orb artifact sits on a stone pedestal. The pink-haired fairy flies closer, curiously inspecting the detailed patterns of the golden ball. The fairy relievedly notes that the artifact is empty, confirming the divine beast must have escaped safely. Rowena remarks that the relics look like junk, but Akid admits they resemble something in his father's study. Akid explains seeing his father hide a similar antique, grumbling about being cheated by a dealer. Rowena is stunned as she recalls the original novel's replica artifact and feels a sudden sense of dread. Standing over a magic circle, Rowena feels unsettled knowing a dark mage artifact might be in her castle. Surrounded by purple roses, Rowena resolutely decides to have the replica thrown out immediately. On a sunny balcony, the blonde Grand Duchess Elena quietly sips her tea amidst the sound of laughter. A sharp clack sounds as Elena slams her teacup down upon hearing someone call her title. Elena sighs in heavy irritation, noting her husband is playing around with other women yet again. A dark sky frames Elena's internal thoughts as she expresses how unpleasant the situation is. A quiet click sounds as Elena turns around and walks back inside the grand estate. The dark-haired Duke Damien and a blonde girl in a pink dress find Elena waiting inside. Elena coldly remarks on his busy schedule, wondering why he has time to spare in a place like this. Damien smugly pulls the blushing blonde girl close, boasting about his unfading popularity. Elena raises the teapot, bluntly asking the young woman what she even likes about Damien. Elena mocks the girl's intelligence, advising her to read the room if she wants a comfortable life. Elena aggressively insults her, asking if her brain is in full bloom since she clings to a married man. A sudden splash sounds as Elena dumps hot tea over the girl's head, declaring the flowers need water. Elena coldly watches her husband standing by the tea-soaked woman, waiting for his reaction. Damien gently reaches out to her, pointing out that she splashed hot tea on her own hand. Damien takes the teapot, advising her to keep a safe distance when watering flowers. Elena mockingly thanks him for his concern, internally calling him a sly, wicked little fox. Elena walks away while reminding the Grand Duke of their boating plans tonight. Elena coldly threatens to throw him into the river if he is late. Damien smiles and promises to keep her warning in mind. Rowena observes the immense physical and emotional distance between the couple, despairing over their coldness. A voice announces their arrival at the river, leaving Rowena in complete awe of the beautiful night view. Rowena stands at the wooden dock, admiring the elegant white boat floating on the water. Rowena happily notes that the river is indeed far more beautiful at night. Akid extends his hand to help Rowena onto the boat, warning her to be careful. A sudden light creak sounds as Rowena carefully steps onto the edge of the floating boat.
The boat glides across the sparkling water with the family sitting in quiet, tense separation.
Rowena gazes at the shimmering water, imagining dancing spirits beneath the glowing waves. Akid places a reassuring hand on her shoulder, warning her not to lean over too far. Akid warns her of the night's dangers, pleased that she doesn't pull away from his touch. Akid gently reaches out his hand, offering it to her once again. Akid calls Rowena's name with a gentle, heartwarming smile that lights up the night. Akid softly asks if she is feeling scared of the dark water. Rowena's heart thumps rapidly as she instantly decides to play along and pretend to be scared. Rowena trembles dramatically while holding his hands, prompting a knowing smile from an amused Akid. Damien turns to his wife with a playful grin, teasingly asking if she is scared too. Elena coldly threatens to throw him overboard, forcing a flustered Damien to nervously clear his throat. Rowena's sweat drops, realizing she must remain constantly alert to prevent a disaster between the parents. With a sudden dramatic bang of the door, Rowena throws it open in fierce determination. Damien looks up from his desk, calmly asking what she needs so soon after returning. Rowena stands firmly, demanding her diary back from her father-in-law. Damien holds up the locked pink diary, claiming he was just about to return it. Rowena ecstatically grabs her diary, holding it triumphantly over her head in pure joy. Damien suddenly questions why she meticulously recorded all of Akid's daily movements in her diary. A sudden heavy thud echoes as Rowena drops her precious diary in sheer paralyzing shock. Rowena stammers in absolute panic, wondering how her father-in-law managed to read her secret entries. Damien proudly explains he bypassed her sloppy magical lock, leaving Rowena screaming internally in outrage. Rowena tearfully yells that she hates him and threatens to report his actions to her mother-in-law. Rowena's dramatic complaints are instantly muffled as a hand firmly clamps over her mouth. Damien quickly apologizes and begs her to calm down before anyone hears her screams. Damien offers her a rare portrait of Akid, prompting a highly suspicious inquiry from Rowena. Damien desperately pleads with her not to tell his wife about his snooping. Rowena's eyes instantly transform into hearts at the irresistible prospect of a secret Akim portrait. Damien is utterly amazed his easy bribe worked, having planned to discard the painting anyway. But Rowena swoons with joy while clutching the adorable portrait, completely forgetting her anger as Damien watches. Rowena gasps in outrage at his plan to discard it, but Damien gladly lets her keep it. Damien reflects on how incredibly organized and easy to read her stalker-like diary entries were. Rowena proudly recalls her lifelong passion for keeping things meticulously organized. Damien pats her head, admitting his surprise at the sheer effort she put into Akid. Rowena accuses him of teasing her, but Damien insists he is genuinely impressed by her dedication. Rowena tilts her head in confusion as he suddenly mentions her playing a special role. Damien promises lucrative rewards and exclusive information about Akid in exchange for her help. Rowena eagerly bows in submission, fully motivated to work hard in exchange for Akid's secrets. With a sly grin, Rowena clasps her hands together and makes one calculated request. A new chapter highlights how surprisingly easy Rowena's life inside the Duke's household has become. Rowena squeals with absolute delight upon finally securing a secret space of her own. She happily explains how her room is cleverly divided for both proper study and passionate fangirling. A quiet, gentle rustle echoes as she pulls back the dark pattern curtain. Rowena hesitantly steps out to ask her assistant if she is truly permitted to use this room. The smiling assistant assures her that the Duke has granted her permission to use it freely. He smoothly presents an unexpected letter sent directly from her family's estate in Alapak. Rowena is taken aback upon receiving a letter sent directly from the Alanak estate. Rowena gasps in utter shock as she reads that her family is suddenly coming to visit. A man's hand places the letter on a desk, discussing Rowena's planned family retreat. Her red-haired family members sit around a circular table, quietly discussing her impending arrival. The red-haired young man stands up excitedly, asking his father if they are going as well. The stern father suggests they follow her secretly to avoid making their youngest daughter uncomfortable. The starry-eyed son expresses his absolute admiration for his father's brilliant, protective idea. The brother with glasses offers to prepare special concealment items so they are not discovered. They shudder as they recall a past disastrous incident when their terrifying youngest sister caught them spying. Another brother suggests welcoming her openly under the pretext of conducting a hotel inspection. The red-haired brother calmly details his plan to properly inspect the nearby ale hotel. Pointing to a circled date on the calendar, they readily agree it is the perfect plan. The sun shines brightly over the grand estate, signaling the start of a busy new day. A sharp sudden click sounds as a pair of boots confidently steps inside. The family throws a surprise welcome party, with the red-haired brother shouting his deep affection. The brown-haired boy with round glasses stares in absolute shock at the sudden shower of confetti. He sits on the floor completely dumbfounded as his carefully built dominoes collapse around him. The family stands awkwardly beside a massive heart-shaped domino pattern declaring their love for Rowena. Looking dark and imposing, the father coldly demands to know the young boy's identity. Shaking with pure terror, the boy wonders where they have taken their precious Rowena. The narrative notes that explaining Kobe was not a kidnapper took 3 grueling hours. Sitting across from Rowena, Akid sympathetically comments on the difficult ordeal Koviston had to endure. Rowena nervously explains that her family simply misunderstood her request regarding a lodging pass. Akid apologetically blames himself for not considering how empty her family must feel without her. He gently explains that he should have invited her family before they sent a letter. Rowena waves her hands in flustered panic, completely overwhelmed by his sweet, thoughtful words. Akid warmly reassures her, while a flustered chibi Rowena insists she is perfectly fine. Staring ahead with a soft expression, Rowena quietly ponders the meaning of a family letter. The warm letter makes it beautifully clear that the original Rowena was raised with immense love. She worries that she is just a fake substitute walking a dangerous tightrope once again. Gentle, warm touch on her cheek breaks Rowena's deep thoughts as Akid calls her name. Akid looks at her with deep concern, gently asking if she is feeling all right. Rowena gently places her hands over his, a soft smile gracing her face. Holding his hand to her cheek, Rowena looks at him with deep affection and happiness. His heart melts as she expresses her absolute happiness, leaving him completely breathless. A sudden, crisp knock sounds as a voice announces that the Grand Duchess is calling. A quiet click sounds as Rowena opens the door in surprise, wondering what her mother-in-law needs. Rowena beams with immense joy upon hearing that the crucial certification process is finally complete. Chibi Rowena happily scurries along, thrilled that her hard-earned reward has finally been finalized. They enter a grand, sunlit parlor decorated with opulent gold and green furnishings. Rowena looks up with wide, brilliant blue eyes as she is warmly greeted. Grand Duchess Elena quietly asks if Henry came in person to deliver the exciting mine approval news. Elena warmly welcomes Rowena to the parlor, while Rowena brings up the successful resolution of the Abyss mine matter. Elena gently stirs her tea and graciously credits Rowena for the smooth resolution. A heavy, tense silence falls over the room as a quiet question lingeringly hangs in the air. Rowena tilts her head in complete confusion, wondering what else there could possibly be to discuss. The brown-haired assistant unexpectedly steps forward, asking if Rowena still has the pocket watch she took from him. Rowena confirms she has it, but internally questions why the assistant is suddenly bringing up the pocket watch. Elena narrows her eyes with deep curiosity, her expression turning incredibly serious. Elena carefully places her hand over a broken golden pocket watch that radiates a shimmering rainbow glow. The assistant points out that Rowena remains perfectly unaffected by the pocket watch despite her severe flower allergy. Rowena gasps in sudden realization as Elena holds up the glowing watch, completely trapping her in the lie. Elena turns her stern gaze back to Rowena, demanding the absolute truth once more. Elena stands firmly against a dark, imposing background, asking Rowena if she truly has nothing to confess. Elena smoothly opens an ornate blue jewelry box, revealing a brilliantly glowing magic stone resting inside. Rowena is completely taken aback upon seeing the rare, shimmering magic stone presented before her. The assistant explains that the high preservation of this exceptionally powerful stone indicates a spirit's contract with a human. GB spirits panic behind a sweat-dropping Rowena, who realizes the assistant quickly figure out her secret. The assistant looks at her with a serious expression, preparing to ask a crucial question. The assistant directly asks what she did inside the wormhole, forcing Rowena to realize she can no longer deny her secrets. Rowena stands firmly, gathering her courage to finally reveal the truth of her magical abilities. Rowena confesses she met spirits, causing Elena to gasp, the assistant to cry, and the chibi spirits to scream in horror. Shimmering, colorful residue slowly dissolves inside the cracked lens of the broken golden pocket watch. Elena looks at her with deep sympathy, comforting Rowena for carrying such a heavy burden all by herself. Chibi Rowena tilts her head in utter confusion, having expected her mother-in-law to be thrilled about her spirit contract. Elena strictly commands Rowena to keep this a secret from everyone, assuring her that Akid will be fine. Elena places a finger to her lips to signal silence as the heavy wooden doors firmly click shut. The flustered assistant desperately tries to explain himself to Rowena, but she coldly turns her head away. Rowena petulantly refuses to show him anything, while the crying assistant apologizes for yielding to the Grand Duchess's intense pressure. Rowena notes that the spirits invisible to others are currently tormenting the assistant, who would likely faint if he knew. Rowena beams brightly as she bids the assistant farewell to go find Akid. Rowena arrives at the training ground, stopping to admire Akid and his instructor sparring with practice swords. Rowena's eyes light up with sparkling stars as she enthusiastically cheers for the training session. Akid gracefully maneuvers through the air, wielding his sword with impressive speed and precision. A quiet click sounds as Rowena eagerly steps forward to get a closer look at his training. The sudden noise startles Akid, causing him to lose his footing as his instructor's sword sweeps in. Rowena screams in panic, prompting the purple-haired instructor to instantly halt his wooden blade inches from Akid. Akid stares blankly in shock, slowly turning around to see who interrupted their intense spar. The instructor safely returns his weapon to his side as he registers the surprise visitor. Akid catches his breath, sweat dropping as he asks Rowena what brought her to the training grounds. Rowena happily claims she came to supervise his practice, leaving Akid flustered and the instructor feeling slightly cheated. The purple-haired instructor politely bows, formally introducing himself to Rowena as Vice Captain Ethan Grave. Rowena warmly asks if she interrupted their sparring, but Ethan reassures her that they were just finishing. Akid respectfully bows to his master to dismiss himself, while Ethan bids him a safe departure. Rowena happily skips beside Akid, sweet-temperedly asking if he would like to take a walk with her. Akid nervously walks away, sweat dropping, while shyly explaining that he has sweated far too much from practice. Rowena playfully reassures him that he doesn't smell, warning him that his constant avoidance hurts her feelings. Rowena gently steps closer, gazing up at him with soft, affectionate eyes as she begs him not to get hurt. Akid stands completely frozen, his face turning bright crimson at her sweet and sudden concern. Rowena swoons with joy, her heart fluttering rapidly at the sight of his adorable, flustered expression. Akid shyly breaks the silence, softly asking where she would like to walk together. Akid leads her to a garden swing bench where Rowena happily sits and calls it one of her favorite spots. Akid asks who will push the swing if they both sit together on it. Glowing light blue butterflies suddenly flutter around the wooden swing bench as it begins to move. Akid stands up in complete shock at the sudden movement, but Rowena gently reassures him. Rowena happily holds his hand and introduces the glowing butterfly spirits to a bewildered Akid. The teasing butterfly spirits joke about Rowena's massive crush on him, much to her flustered annoyance. Akid recognizes the glowing butterflies from the mine, which Rowena readily confirms. Rowena recalls how she gained the rare ability to command spirits after a past incident. Akid admits he always found her sudden disappearance on that fateful day very strange. Rowena curiously asks why he never questioned her about what had happened during that disappearance. Akid softly confesses that his only concern was his absolute happiness over her safe return. Deeply touched by his warmth, Rowena confesses she fell into toxic Delos flowers, throwing Akid into panic. Akid stares at her with deep concern, gently seeking confirmation that she is truly all right now. Rowena happily assures him she is safe, teasing that he can now give her those flowers. Akid asks if she knows the specific meaning behind the beautiful Delos flowers. A serene Delos flower stands tall, symbolizing the romantic sentiment of only having eyes for one. Rowena stands completely frozen, her heart skipping a beat at the flower's deep romantic meaning. Despite the beautiful confession, a sudden bitter pang of guilt prickles deep inside Rowena's chest. She sadly recalls that those romantic words were originally destined for the story's true heroine, Mabel. Rowena firmly demands that he must never give those symbolic flowers to any other person. She immediately doubts herself, worrying she was too presumptuous about a fate that wasn't hers. Akid looks at her with a gentle, reassuring smile, touched by her sudden possessive request. Rowena blushes deeply, completely captivated by his soft expression and silent, warm reassurance. The atmosphere turns incredibly solemn as Ashiel declares the current situation to be highly critical. Ashiel deeply worries that Rowena will become a target due to the mysterious contamination on Stig Island. Ashiel fears the Imperial family will ruthlessly exploit Rowena's rare powers if her identity is exposed. Ashiel hesitantly proposes keeping her secret safe from the Imperial family, despite Elena's royal ties. Elena firmly declares she would never endanger their child, warming Ashiel's heart with those sweet words. Elena promises to handle the Emperor personally, prompting Ashiel to smile at his wife's powerful influence. Ashiel reassures Elena that no one would ever dare challenge the absolute authority of the Grand Duchess. Elena sighs and points out that Rowena's young age leaves her with far too many vulnerabilities. Elena gives him a piercing, deadly serious gaze, reminding him of their past painful experiences. The narrative explains that descendants of dragons possess immense magic but face a highly perilous transition period. This critical awakening phase leaves the magic wielder incredibly weakened and exposed to extreme danger. To protect their children from potential enemies, security at the castle becomes exceptionally tight. Ashiel somberly acknowledges her warning, fully understanding the grave weight of the awakening period. Ashiel firmly insists that his intimate knowledge of the danger is exactly why they must prepare. Elena coldly states that she has already learned the devastating price of carelessness the hard way. A tense exchange regarding a past accident reveals lingering resentment over Elena's previous severe injuries. Ashiel tries to defend his past actions, asserting he simply did what was morally right. Elena is taken aback by his words, her stern facade briefly faltering in surprise. Ashiel suddenly leans in close, demanding the absolute truth while Elena struggles to maintain composure. Ashiel questions if she doubts the sincerity of his marriage proposal, but she coldly dismisses him. Ashiel denies marrying her out of mere obligation, but falls completely silent when pressed for his real reason. Frustrated by his constant silence, Elena demands that he at least attempt to make an excuse. The heavy wooden door slams shut with a sudden echoing crash as Elena angrily storms out. Ashiel rubs his temples in absolute frustration, deeply sighing over the difficult conversation. Ashiel quickly inquires about the Stig Island deployment list, halting its delivery to the Imperial family. Ashiel stuns his butler by declaring he will personally lead the Stig Island expedition himself. Ashiel demands absolute secrecy, determined to personally uncover the truth hidden on Stig Island. From her window, Rowena curiously watches the elite Haterus Knights prepare for their secret departure. Rowena worries about the Grand Duke's business trip, hoping her apprehension is just excessive worry. A gentle knock sounds on the door as the Grand Duke asks to enter, surprising Rowena. Opening the door, Rowena politely invites her father-in-law to come in. As he enters, Rowena wonders why he came to her room instead of his study. Ashiel reveals his deployment to contaminated Stig Island is for her, worrying Rowena as she recalls the novel's Dead Land. Ashiel warns that contamination could spread continent-wide, prompting Rowena to admit a spirit contractor would be needed. Ashiel notes there might be other contractors, but expresses concern about her being left to face it alone. Rowena suggests stepping forward, but Ashiel firmly rejects the idea, declaring it won't do. Ashiel warns that purifying the continent alone is far too physically demanding and dangerous for her. Rowena is surprised, realizing she expected him to demand her self-sacrifice instead of genuinely worrying about her. Ashiel gently asks her to bow her head for a moment while he retrieves something. He places a necklace around her neck, explaining it is an artifact that conceals her magical powers. The golden artifact cradles a brilliant red gem, glowing softly against a shimmering pink background. Gently patting her head, Ashiel warns her to keep it on and avoid trouble while he's gone. A grand carriage waits outside the soaring stone towers of the majestic castle under a bright sky. Rowena is left standing in utter confusion with question marks floating around her head. Staring in disbelief at the maids carrying endless colorful gifts, Rona loudly demands to know what is happening. Kobe explains these are accumulated gifts sent to her from the April family, shocking Rowena. Kobe notes the Marquis prepared gifts constantly, while Rowena suspects the sender is a fellow fan. Rowena is glad Kobe enjoyed his trip, but is puzzled when he calls it his most unforgettable vacation. Flushed with joy, Kobe explains the Marquis treated him wonderfully, leaving Rowena curious about the details. While Rowena wonders how Kobe was treated, Kobe eagerly offers his future assistance before she bids him rest. Rhythmic footsteps sound down the hallway as a woman's voice asks if something has happened. Rowena excitedly greets her blonde mother-in-law, Elena, explaining that gifts have arrived from her family. Her expression turning serious, Elena asks if they can talk privately for a moment. Elena explains Henry will stay at the villa since manpower is no longer needed at the mine. Rowena worries about the mine shutdown, but Elena dryly retorts that her mountain of debt makes it irrelevant. As Elena sharp-tonguedly asks if Rowena is fine without profits, Rowena sweat drops at the quick jab. Rowena cheerily responds she is fine, noting the Grand Duke did everything for Elena's sake. Elena instructs Rowena to keep her weekend free for an upcoming trip with Akid, causing Rowena to wonder where. Elena teasingly asks if she thinks she will sell them off, while Rowena notes the castle's gloomy mood. A bright smile lights up Rowena's face as she playfully clings to Elena's arm, telling her to buy them back. Elena is left completely speechless as she imagines a helpless chibi Rowena crying from inside a sack. Clinging to Elena's arm, Rowena beams happily while Elena wishes her ability to speak had failed. White doves flutter gracefully around a grand cathedral standing tall by a shimmering seaside town. Rowena is ecstatic to arrive in Proteum, recalling it as the place where Akid's romance with Mabel began. A sly-looking priest named Pablo introduces himself, sending a wave of panic through Rowena. Pablo explains they will measure the children's magical awakening periods, inviting the group to step inside. A bright torch crackles softly as its warm flame illuminates a rough stone corridor well. The group walks silently down a dim stone corridor toward a set of massive doors. Spotting Akid's hand suddenly flinching and trembling, Rowena looks at him with deep concern. Turning to her with a soft smile, Akid quickly dismisses her worry, claiming it is nothing. Rowena remains deeply worried, noting to herself that Akid's pale complexion looks extremely unwell. A low creak echoes as Pablo pushes open a heavy white door, directing the children inside. Pablo explains the ornate egg artifact provides highly accurate measurements, while Rowena marvels at the glittering relic. Pablo opens the top half of the giant egg, instructing Rowena to step inside for her measurements. Settling inside the dark egg, Rowena is confused by the bumpy, uneven texture of the inner walls. Her hand gently touches the inner wall, causing the ancient runes to glow with yellow light. Purple smoke suddenly erupts from the artifact, causing Pablo to cough, while Elena and Akid watch in shock. Dizzy from the smoke, Rowena is gently helped out of the artifact by Akid, who checks on her. Elena sternly demands answers from the silent cardinal regarding the total lack of prior inspections. Akid notes the magical measurement process will take some time, causing Rowena to ask if he is all right. Rowena gently observes that temples seem to make Akid uncomfortable, wondering if it is just her imagination. Surprised by her perception, Akid asks if it was obvious, and Rowena confirms it slightly was. Akid somberly reveals a dark past memory of nearly dying after being deceived by a street priest. Rowena reacts in complete shock, while Akid explains he was too focused on survival to doubt anything. Grim flashback reveals how the Grand Duke fortunately found and saved him just in time to survive. He explains that vulnerable street children are frequently targeted with deceptive offers from corrupt priests. A quite somber flashback shows a shadowy priest reaching out to two impoverished street children. Akid details how he was gradually coerced into illegally delivering packages that contained illicit drugs. Standing in the cathedral, Akid confesses his lingering guilt over living comfortably while others still suffer. Rowena passionately insists that the deceptive priest, not Akid, is entirely to blame for those actions. Rowena asks if any clues remain, prompting Akid to search his memories for any useful detail. Akid suddenly recalls that the priest had a distinct bass clef mark tattooed on his wrist. Rowena suspects a secret organization is involved, knowing the Grand Duke would ruthlessly pursue them. Rowena curiously asks Akid if he has ever revealed these dark details to his father. Akid explains his distant relationship with his father, though Rowena strongly believes the Duke would listen. Akid gently reassures her, stating that searching for the priest now would not change anything. A heavy silence falls as Akid doubts whether his old street friends are even alive anymore. Rowena promises to keep his secret, demanding he turn to her when things get too hard. Rhythmic footsteps sound down the corridor as Elena approaches, instructing the children that it is time to go. Elena dryly announces their overnight stay because the careless priest forgot to recharge the measurement artifact. Elena teasingly asks Rowena if she desires to share a room with Akid tonight. Rowena flusteredly stammers an excuse, but Elena firmly reminds her of the temple's strict segregation rules. Elena commands Rowena to hurry along, leaving her to walk away in comical, disappointed defeat. Rowena grumbles about the forced separation, only to be startled by Elena's sudden sharp throat clearing. Rowena nervously wonders if Akid is relieved to have narrowly escaped sharing a room with her. Elena humbly asks Rowena to bear with her, but Rowena warmly praises her mother-in-law's efforts. Walking down the dark hallway, Rowena turns back in surprise as Akid suddenly calls her name. Leaning him close, Akid softly whispers a secret invitation for a late-night walk together. With a breathtaking, gentle smile, Akid specifies that the walk will be just the two of them. Promotional banner displays various popular series recommendations for eager online readers to check out. An informational graphic highlights affordable coinless access to upcoming comic chapters without breaking the bank. A sharp creaking sound echoes as someone forcefully leans back in a wooden chair. Edward Ethel, heir to Duke Ethel, sighs in deep frustration after being tricked by his father. The reading boy dryly points out that Proteum offers absolutely no entertainment besides outdoor activities. Turning a page, the boy questions the logic of expecting entertainment inside a sacred temple. Crown Prince Zeronis Kenhate sits gracefully surrounded by a beautiful cascade of white roses. Edward eagerly invites Zeronis to join him, but the Crown Prince calmly declines due to restrictions. Edward playfully whines, insisting that a brief escape would go completely unnoticed by anyone anyway. Zeronis whacks Edward on the head with his book, telling him to go out alone. Edward mutters that bringing Kathy along would have been far more enjoyable than staying with Zeronis. Zeronis sharply questions if Lady Ethel is his toy, which Edward instantly denies, calling her his precious sister. Declaring he will go diving, Edward ignores Zeronis' warning about the severe consequences of getting caught. Edward smugly tells Zeronis not to cry from loneliness while he is gone on his escape. A furious Zeronis throws his book at Edward, who quickly flees the room while laughing hysterically. Zeronis mutters that only Edward's relationship to Kathy spares him, while Edward sneaks down the stairs. Stepping outside, Edward is confident he has traveled far enough to keep his lodging location hidden. Moving through the gardens, Edward suddenly stops as he spots Rowena sitting by a majestic glowing fountain. Rowena suddenly looks up in surprise at a soft rustling sound, wondering who is approaching her. The strawberry blonde boy suddenly turns around with a startled and wide-eyed expression. He is internally overwhelmed, questioning the strange and sudden feeling washing over him. Blushing transitionally, his hand clutches his chest as his heart pounds rapidly. Rowena stands near the fountain, suspicious of the flustered boy peeking at her from behind a stone pillar. Rowena tries to identify the stranger, finding it hard to believe who he might be. She wonders if it is truly possible for the villainous' brother to be here. As Rowena suddenly addresses him, a loud gasp escapes the boy's mouth in pure shock. Peeking around the corner, Rowena bluntly questions why he keeps staring at her. While the flustered boy weakly denies it, Rowena points out she saw him hiding behind the pillar. Blushing and stammering an apology, he hastily flees, leaving Rowena to doubt he is the notorious Edward Ethel. Rowena recalls rumors of Edward's massive, intimidating build and thuggish fight-picking personality. Knowing he even bullied the heroine, Rowena notes he seems more like the victim here. Rowena kindly apologizes for startling him, but the panicked boy loudly insists he wasn't startled. Rowena asks if he is sick due to his extremely red face, causing him to stagger back. Rowena feels guilty, imagining the boy is a giant blushing tomato hiding his face. Rowena bids him farewell to leave, but the boy suddenly reaches out in panic. He abruptly grabs her wrist with shocking force, causing Rowena to cry out in surprise. The boy quietly demands to know her name, leaving Rowena completely bewildered by his request. He suddenly screams his demand for her name, his voice echoing loudly through the corridor. Rowena's sweat drops and nervously asks him to let go of her hand first. Suddenly, another hand forcefully grabs his wrist, making him cry out with a sharp grunt. Rowena turns and is incredibly relieved to see Akid standing beside her. Akid fiercely demands his identity, while the boy glares back, dropping his stuttering completely. Akid's blue eyes narrow into a cold, menacing glare of absolute fury. Turning to Rowena, Akid mockingly asks the identity of the gorilla, emphasizing her title. Rowena explains they just met, prompting Akid to demand why he was grabbing her wrist. Rowena explains it was sudden, fueling Akid's cold anger as he processes the gesture. Akid declares the boy acted like a ruffian, sparking an outraged reaction from him. Offering a sweet yet terrifying smile, Akid asks Rowena how she wants him handled. The boy stands completely frozen in shock, repeating Akid's words in disbelief. He panics as the realization of Rowena's identity hits him, surrounded by floating question marks. Akid demands an immediate apology while the boy protests loudly about their young marriage. The boy suddenly pauses, taking a closer look at Akid's distinct black hair. Akid mockingly compares the boy's pale hair to a plucked chicken, sparking a furious shout. Seeing them bicker like children, Rowena bursts into giggles and covers her mouth. Akid coldly warns him to look away as they stand locked in a tense confrontation. The boy deduces Akid must be from the Haderus family based on his black hair. Rowena is stunned that the boy correctly identified Akid's lineage so easily. Akid demands to know what the heir of Duke Ethel is doing in Protium. Rowena accidentally blurts out Edward Ethel's name, causing both boys to turn to her in shock. Gasps of panic fill Rowena's mind as she frantically tries to cover up her slip-up. Edward looks down at her with a flushed face, completely flustered. Rowena quickly clanks she heard of him because he attended the academy with her brothers. Edward realizes she is the younger sister of the twins, recalling their lost contact. Edward instantly turns gloomy, making Rowena note his dramatic, rapid mood swings. Rowena asks what brought him here, and Edward explains he is on an academic inspection. A giant question mark floats over a confused Chibi Rowena at the mention of an academic society. Edward explains the social club, triggering a flashback of Kyle holding a book. Edward notes Kyle went traveling, so only he and another member named Zero came. Rona is left in utter shock, realizing the novel's male lead, Zeronis, is also here. Rowena excitedly declares Zeronis as her second favorite character after Akid, eager to see him. A soft rustle sounds as Akid politely offers his hand to guide her, and Rowena nervously accepts. Bumping into them, Edward asks where they are heading, and Rowena mentions they are walking to the artificial lake. Edward tries to join their walk, but Akid coldly tells him not to follow them. Edward strongly insists they visit the Magenta Clubhouse, which Rowena politely agrees to do. Rowena is struck with a sudden realization as her eyes widen in shock. Akid smiles warmly, gently insisting that she must only go to the clubhouse with him. Edward complains about not inviting Akid, but Akid mockingly pressures him into accepting his presence anyway. Rowena giggles in amusement while Edward grumbles in defeat behind them. The young couple enjoys a peaceful, romantic walk along the beautiful, glittering artificial lake. Akid gazes downward at her with quiet concern in his eyes. He gently inspects Rowena's wrist, noting that it has turned red from being grabbed. With a soft, quiet gasp, Rowena agrees that the mark on her wrist is indeed still red. Akid's gaze softens as he continues to stare at her injured wrist. A soft rustling sound breaks the quiet as Akid steps in closer to examine her more carefully. A soft puff of warm breath is felt as Akid gently blows on her wrist, making her flinch. Standing by the water, Akid softly commands Rowena to hold still. Akid advises her not to let others mistreat her or think everything is fine just because she smiles. Gently holding her wrist, Akid admits he is angry because he has always been careful not to hurt her. Akid tells her to kick offenders in the shin, though she worries about Edward's high noble status. Akid confidently reminds her that her husband is the heir to the Grand Duke, so she has nothing to fear. He playfully references her past temper, noting how intimidating she can be when angry. Rowena embarrassedly begs him to forget about her past outbursts while Akid smiles gently. Akid softly confesses that it is actually scarier for him when she is out of his sight. He adds that seeing her with another man makes him feel strange. Rowena is left wondering what he means as their reflections shimmer in the lake. Akid instructs her on exactly what to do if she encounters a suspicious person again. Rowena proudly declares she will be safe because she is Akid's wife. Akid promises to handle any trouble as they continue their late-night walk together. A sudden sharp click sounds as the door opens. Zeronis turns his head from his book to see who is entering. Zeronis asks why he returned so soon, and a defeated Edward grumbles about failing to reach the lake. Zeronis mockingly asks if he encountered a bear, given his highly agitated state. Edward sits back and asks Zeronis if he has ever met Kyle's younger sister. Zeronis plainly replies that he has just met her. Zeronis scolds him for stirring up trouble when he was supposed to keep a low profile. Edward defensively protests that he isn't foolish enough to say anything stupid. Edward passionately describes their accidental meeting as fate, but Zeronis dismisses it since she is already married. Edward swoons over her beauty, but Zeronis remarks that he wouldn't want to introduce his sister to Edward either. Edward complains about the insult, while Zeronis tells him to look in a mirror as a soft knock-knock sounds. A low, prolonged creak echoes from the doorway as it begins to open. Zeronis internally notes that his intuition was correct about the visitor's identity. Zeronis is surprised to see his aunt standing before him. Elena warmly greets them, noting that it has been a long time since they last met. Elena explains that she happened to run into His Highness's attendant outside. Zeronis politely asks what brought his aunt all the way to Proteum. Elena reveals she had business here and decided to stop by with her son and daughter-in-law. Zeronis recalls how his father was deeply unsettled when the Grand Duke acknowledged his illegitimate child. Zeronis contemplates how shocking this revelation about the illegitimate child must have been for his aunt. Elena asks if he is truly comfortable with the situation, but Zeronis calmly questions why he wouldn't be. Elena warmly greets Edward, noting that she has arrived at the location as well. Edward smiles gently, expressing that he had already anticipated her presence here too. Edward asks if Kathy has also arrived, but Zeronis explains she stayed behind due to a leg injury. Elena realizes that Kathy's sudden injury is the reason why the Duke had to return so hurriedly. Edward explains his father became overly protective of Kathy after her illness, while Zeronis notes Edward is simply too rough. Elena warmly turns to Zeronis and asks how he has been feeling lately. Standing opposite Elena, Zeronis downplays her worries, explaining his visit to Proteum is a mere formality. A decorative text box emphasizes that Zeronis must not overexert himself because the Empire's future relies on his health. Zeronis stands with a subtle, gentle smile amidst a background of blooming light. Zeronis inquires about Elena's own health, worrying if the harsh northern climate has negatively affected her. Elena begins to dismiss his concern when she is suddenly cut off by a loud calling shout. A dark-haired maid abruptly bursts through the doorway, breathlessly apologizing for her sudden interruption. Elena questions the commotion, and the maid urgently reports that the Grand Duchess is desperately searching for her. Elena is deeply shocked when the maid reveals that Rowena's husband, the young Grand Duke Akid, is in critical condition. In a flashback, Rowena holds Akid's hand during their night walk and is startled by how intensely hot it feels. Rowena stops by the lake and worriedly asks Akid if he is feeling unwell. Sweating and struggling, Akid tries to weakly deny that anything is wrong with him. Akid winces in severe discomfort as he desperately fights to stay conscious. Rowena looks on in sheer panic and distress as Akid's condition rapidly deteriorates. Akid collapses entirely onto the grass, prompting a terrified Rowena to catch him while screaming his name. Rowena desperately calls out for the guards, commanding them to carry Akid straight to the infirmary instead of his lodging. A candelabra burns brightly beside a dark window, setting a somber tone for the passing night. Inside the infirmary, Rowena watches anxiously over Akid as he lies completely unconscious on the bed. Rowena wallows in deep regret, feeling unworthy of being his supporter because she failed to notice his illness. Rowena recognizes that only another awakened person could suppress Akid's seizure, lamenting the Grand Duke's absence. A sudden sharp noise echoes through the quiet room as the door is pushed open. Elena flings the door open, urgently calling out Rowena's name in deep concern. Rowena turns toward her mother-in-law with tears welling in her eyes, looking completely relieved. Rowena throws herself into Elena's arms, crying out for her mother as Elena asks what happened. Crushed by overwhelming anxiety, Rowena continues to weep softly against Elena's shoulder. Rowena explains Akid collapsed from a fever and that spirits identified it as a pre-awakening seizure, prompting them to hide his state. Elena is startled by the mention of a seizure but reflects that the Dark Dragon's domain might make the process less painful. Elena pats Rowena's head, praising her for handling the situation discreetly before others could find out. Elena mentions they are fortunate because someone highly knowledgeable about pre-awakening seizures is currently nearby. Standing beside Elena, Rowena wonders who this knowledgeable person could possibly be. Elena explains that she cannot reveal the helper's identity because they are an extremely high-ranking individual. Elena instructs Rowena to act completely ignorant of the helper's identity, even if she manages to deduce who they are. Rowena submissively obeys her mother's instructions as a magical trail shimmers on the floor. The blue curtains hang quietly beside the window, awaiting the arrival of their secret guest. A low creak sounds as the door to the room slowly swings open. An attendant guides a mysterious cloaked figure wearing a dark hood into the room. Elena bows deeply and expresses her profound gratitude to the hooded guest for responding so quickly. Elena reassures the guest about their security, while Rowena internally realizes why she had to pretend not to know him. A majestic silhouette explains that the only individuals holding a higher rank than the Grand Duchess are the Imperial family. The Crown Prince reveals his face under the hood, casually telling Elena to think nothing of his swift arrival. The Crown Prince lowers his hood entirely as his attendant stands respectfully behind him. Now fully unhooded, the Crown Prince looks directly at Akid's bed with a serious expression. Asking to be pardoned for a moment, the attendant extends his hand as a golden magical light begins to swirl. The attendant places his glowing magic-infused hand over Akid's chest to begin the treatment. Rowena watches anxiously as glowing golden chains of magic envelop Akid to stabilize his state. The attendant finishes restoring a kid's blocked mana flow, concluding he was overwhelmed by high-density mana. Elena turns to the attendant, asking if these symptoms seem familiar to him. The attendant confirms her suspicions, noting Akid's body is just as sensitive as the Crown Prince's. He suggests this isn't the first time, leaving Elena to ponder if Akid had been suffering in silence. The attendant explains that such a severe reaction usually builds up over time, even in protium. Elena realizes Akid must have hidden the warning signs, lamenting how difficult he is to read. Rowena quietly looks down at him, wishing her husband would learn to lean on her more. Crown Prince steps up behind Rowena, curiously asking if her necklace is some kind of protective ward. He closely inspects the glowing red jewel, noting it seems infused with unique, powerful magic. Rowena mentally notes his sharp instincts before explaining it was a protective gift from her father. Prince explains the stone is incredibly rare, leaving Rowena surprised by its true value. The Crown Prince looks incredulous, realizing she has been wearing it openly without knowing its value. Rowena looks confused as the prince warns her that this is no ordinary gemstone. He explains the gem is called Hamar and contains actual dragon blood, shocking Rowena completely. Elena tries to soothe Rowena's panic, noting very few people would ever recognize the legendary stone. Elena adds that the Crown Prince only recognized it because he possesses one himself. Prince nods, confirming he previously saw the rare stone locked inside the Emperor's private vault. Rowena is deeply shaken, realizing she has been casually wearing an item of Imperial Vault caliber. Elena casually tells her to stand tall, mentioning the stone is only worth about a single island. Rowena looks at the precious gem, wondering if she should display it rather than hide it. Elena reassures her that the Grand Duke has plenty more of them in his private vault anyway. The prince adds that the Grand Duke once hunted a dragon, so such stones wouldn't impress him. In a comical chibi moment, Rowena sweat drops at how casually these wealthy nobles view priceless treasures. The scene shifts to the dark sea where a ship sails quietly under the crescent moon. On the harbor, hooded cultists kneel before their leader, reporting they found no traces on Stig Island. The dark-haired leader, wearing a gold claw-like ring, finds the lack of evidence highly suspicious. She muses that a ritual of this scale should have left clear traces of contamination behind. A cultist explains the surge of demonic beasts makes it nearly impossible to investigate deeper. The leader refuses to send reinforcements, insisting they must keep their numbers minimal now that Habilis has arrived. The cultist reassures her that no one suspects their involvement unless they are ancient beings themselves. The leader slides on her ornate golden finger claw, warning them to remain absolutely cautious. She insists they must prevent their order's secret techniques from ever leaking to the public. The cultist confidently replies that the imperial family will never uncover the truth of Stig Island. The leader counters that while the capital royals are oblivious, the Northern Grand Duke is highly dangerous. Secret records scatter as she notes the Heteros family possesses knowledge hidden even from the crown. Legends speak of the dark dragon Zapharthia, who once contracted with 4 chosen human houses. These ancient bloodlines included gold, darkness, flame, and another that has long since vanished. The star bloodline of Lewis has completely disappeared, leaving no visible traces behind. The leader warns that the Haderis family's information network is far too dangerous to underestimate. A sharp shink sounds as she draws a dagger and cuts her own hand to draw blood. Blood drips down her palm, activating a strange trouble clef tattoo on her inner wrist. The cultists watch in pure awe as her dark magic begins to manifest. She hands them a vial of her blood, instructing them to use it as a decoy near the Grand Duke's camp. Her followers eagerly accept the vial, reminding themselves to locate the sacrifice before anyone else. Cultists bow deeply to their leader, ready to carry out her dark designs. The leader smiles malevolently, promising they will soon reclaim the ancient glory of their order. A soft crackle of burning wax sounds from the candelabra as night slowly transitions to dawn. Akid's hand twitches slightly as he begins to regain consciousness on the bed. Groaning in discomfort, Akid sits up and realizes his chronic affliction has flared up once again. He opens his eyes fully, only to be startled by the sight of Rowena sitting right beside him. Rowena sits asleep in a chair beside the bed, her red hair draped over a white nightgown. Akid sits up in bed, looking at the sleeping Rowena and wondering if she stayed by his side all night. A quiet, gentle breeze shifts the blue curtains as sparkling light particles drift into the room. Akid looks on in surprise as he spots tiny glowing blue spirits hovering near Rowena. In a flashback, Rowena explains to Akid that spirits are incredibly talkative instead of being dignified, noisy enough to make her ears fall off. Akid gently smiles and presses a finger to his lips, whispering to the spirits to keep quiet since Rowena is sleeping. The small, playful spirits giggle softly as they hover close to the sleeping girl. Rowena loses her balance and slips forward, prompting a startled Akid to reach out and call her name. Akid catches Rowena as she falls, holding her close to his chest in surprise. Rowena rests peacefully against Akid's chest, completely unaware of her sudden movement. Akid's heart races as he looks down at her sleeping face, a soft blush coloring his cheeks. The room falls quiet as Akid remains still, holding Rowena gently in his arms. Akid gently brushes her red hair, wondering why she pushed herself so hard to nurse him when she is normally a heavy sleeper. The kid pulls her closer into a warm embrace, softly wondering why she is always so good to him. A quiet thought lingers in the silence of the night, reflecting on being nobody special. The warm morning sun begins to shine brightly through the window, signaling the arrival of dawn. Bright sunlight floods the bedroom, where Rowena is now fast asleep in the bed beside a kid. Still asleep, Rowena holds Akid's hand tightly, dreaming about how wonderfully warm it feels. Rowena suddenly snaps her eyes open in absolute shock as she wakes up. Kid lies propped up next to her, smiling playfully as he asks if holding his hand is another one of her sleep habits, leaving her completely baffled. Rowena blushes furiously and covers her mouth, squeaking out a bewildered question. Overwhelmed by panic, Rowena frantically tells herself to enjoy being in bed with Akid before she wakes up from what she hopes is a dream. Akid gazes at her intensely, warning her that looking at him like that is highly dangerous. Comically stunned, Rowena stands lost in a vast galaxy of confusion, completely unable to process his words. Flustered and blushing, Rowena scrambles backward and apologizes profusely while Akid watches in surprise. Rowena panics internally, frantically thinking that she is actually the one who is too dangerous for Akid right now. Rowena nervously asks if she did something wrong, while Akid looks back and asks what she could have possibly done. Rowena anxiously worries if she kissed or hugged him too tightly in her sleep, while Akid reassures her that she did nothing wrong. Akid cheerfully confesses that he actually liked it and notes it was his first time ever spending the night with someone, prompting a sweat-dropping Rowena to wonder about his suggestive phrasing. Akid reminds her they have a promise from before their wedding to not share a room yet, leaving Rowena completely confused. Akid looks surprised, asking if Marquis April ever mentioned the agreement to her. Akid explains they agreed not to share a bed until she reaches adulthood, leaving Rowena horrified to realize that is still 7 years away. Stunned by the devastating news, Rowena hilariously faints backward as a startled Akid tries to catch her. A panicked call echoes through the room as Akid screams Rowena's name. The scene shifts to the grand mansion standing tall under the clear morning sky. A sudden loud growl from an empty stomach breaks the silence in the dining room. Rowena sits at the dining table looking comically drained and exhausted. Elena looks on thoughtfully, quietly observing the young couple. Elena comments that Rowena looks like the one who is sick all night, while a weary Rowena weakly mutters a morning greeting. Elena turns her attention to Akid, asking him how he is feeling. Akid confirms he is feeling fine and apologizes for causing everyone so much worry. Elena scolds him gently, pointing out that of all the things to keep hidden, he should never have concealed his illness. Akid looks puzzled by the accusation, asking what he was supposed to have hidden. Elena explains that the doctor mentioned his symptoms suggest he has experienced these seizures in the past. Elena reflects that it really wasn't his first seizure, and Akid admits he had one before while living on the streets. Elena asks him in concern how he managed to endure the pain back then and if he saw a doctor. Akid looks down quietly, reflecting on his difficult past. Akid explains he simply slept until the pain stopped, prompting a shocked Elena to ask if he was really foolish enough to just endure it. Akid explains that back then, buying bread to survive was far more important than seeing a doctor. Elena places a hand to her chin, falling into a saddened, reflective silence. At the dining table, Akid anxiously asks if his affliction is terminal, but Elena quickly reassures him that nobody is dying. She explains that his symptoms are actually early signs of a rare magical awakening, leaving the boy deeply startled. To help him manage his condition, Elena instructs Akid that he must visit Prodium regularly from now on. Shifting the mood, Elena quietly sips her tea as the dining room falls silent. Under the high arched ceiling of the estate, Elena formally introduces the hooded Zeronis to Akid while Rowena looks on. As the boys shake hands, Rowena watches anxiously, surprised by how quickly she has crossed paths with the male lead. A vision of Mabel, the story's actual female lead, comes to mind, prompting Rowena to wonder about her whereabouts. Standing amidst a backdrop of purple flowers, Rowena ponders her next move in this changing narrative. A brown-haired butler gently interrupts her thoughts, announcing that it is time for them to depart. Turning back, Rowena stops the butler to request a private investigation. Rowena seriously instructs him to search for a girl named Mabel residing in Istis. Back at the mansion, Elena asks Rowena what important news she wanted to share with them. Surrounded by a bright, sunny aura, Rowena happily announces she has something special to present. At Rowena's call, the maid Hannah rolls in a wooden cart carrying a beautifully adorned yellow box. Elena stares in disbelief at the strange contraption before her. Elena notes she thought the special lantern was out of stock, but Rowena explains she commissioned a new one. Akid sheepishly asks if she went through this trouble because of her disappointment over the ruined flower seeds. Holding the box proudly, Rowena explains this lantern serves a completely different purpose. Elena inspects the yellow container, admitting she sees no visual difference other than its smaller size. Akid quickly spots a glass lens fitted onto the side, impressing Rowena with his sharp observation. Rowena beams with pride as she cradles her newly designed magic tool. Deep in the frozen northern territory, heavy snow blankets a small, isolated mountain village. A hand unfolds a document describing the trial run of the new magical drone. Shield clutches his chin, sweating as he reads the astonishing proposal. A report details how extreme winter weather has kept local residents trapped and isolated. Out in the freezing elements, guards discuss the growing impossibility of keeping the citizens confined. Back inside the cabin, a guard announces the arrival of a special package from the Yahello mansion. Unboxing the gift, they find the magical drone alongside instructions for its operation. The documentation explains how the Yahello family developed these video-transmitting drones to scout hazardous snowbound terrains. Ashiel is utterly stunned by the astronomical purchase price printed on the document. Reading further, Ashiel notes that the rental fee is highly affordable by comparison. Intrigued by the innovative business model, Ashiel wonders if he should test the device out. Back at the estate, Rowena cheers in delight before a chest overflowing with gold coins. Recalling the successful rental businesses from her past life, Rowena eagerly hopes to clear her debts soon. A maid approaches Rowena delivering a special celebratory gift sent directly from the Duchess. Rowena gasps in disbelief as she is handed a glittering bouquet crafted entirely from red jewels. Happily clutching the roses, Rowena agrees to the Duchess's request to share her next business ventures with her first. Overjoyed with her success, a comically small Rowena skips down the hall, clutching her sparkling bouquet. Suddenly, Rowena freezes in her tracks as something unexpected catches her attention. She spots a beautifully crafted silver cage resting on a table, holding a mysterious bird inside. Rowena leans in close to inspect the creature, which is covered in vibrant red feathers. The red bird glares right back at her with a deadpan expression, unnerving the young girl. Hannah enters the room with linens, and Rowena immediately asks her who brought the strange red bird. Hannah explains that Akid sent the bird to serve as a carrier for her new business, shocking Rowena. Instantly changing her attitude, a beaming Rowena coos at the bird, calling it incredibly clever and beautiful. The red bird blinks, remaining entirely unimpressed by her sudden praise. With a sudden flutter, the bird flaps its wings inside the cage, drawing her attention downward. Rowena gasps as she notices a folded white letter that has fallen beside the cage. Reading the letter, she discovers Akid chose the bird because its bright red feathers reminded him of her. Rowena's face flushes a deep red as she reads a sweet confession about thinking of her constantly. Clutching the letter to her chest, Rowena smiles warmly, deeply touched by Akid's thoughtful and romantic gesture. Hannah curiously asks Rowena what the letter says, noticing her nervous, trembling reaction. Blushing deeply, Rowena nervously deflects her maid's inquiry by asking why she wants to know. Desperately changing the subject, Rowena frantically asks Hannah if her hair and dress look presentable. Hannah warmly reassures her lady that she always looks pretty, prompting Rowena to reflect quietly. In the study, Count Harrington instructs Akid on how to gather and direct his internal mana. Akid strains with deep focus, sweating as he tries to control his volatile energy. A flash of magical light fades as Count Harrington completes the intense training session. Count Harrington advises the boy that his power remains difficult to manage without being fully awakened. Count Harrington reassuringly notes that while it is difficult now, he will eventually adapt. Surprised by the high praise, Akid asks if he is truly as talented as the tutor claims. The instructor explains that once Akid fully awakens, almost no opponent will defeat him. Count Harrington smiles warmly, emphasizing that a hard-working genius is truly unstoppable. Determined to protect what is important, Akid clenches his fist and expresses his desire to grow stronger. Akid resolves to achieve absolute power because he has someone precious he must protect. Startled by the boy's sudden, mature declaration, Count Harrington can only blink in surprise. Count Harrington quietly strokes his chin, reflecting that the rumors of the couple's close bond must be true. He recalls how cold the young couple used to be and marvels at the castle's changed atmosphere. Count Harrington feels deeply relieved that the family has finally found happiness as a proper couple. Count Harrington sagely observes that a person naturally grows stronger when they have someone to protect. Surrounded by bright blooming flowers, Akid smiles softly and agrees with his mentor's words. Outside the window, a nervous hand gently presses against a glass pane. Rowena is caught comically peering through the window, her face pressed flat against the glass. Captivated by her adorable blushing face, Akid admits to himself that he cannot resist her. Count Harrington glances back at the window, sweat dropping at the sight of Rowena eagerly watching them. Amused by the interruption, Count Harrington chuckles and suggests they wrap up their lesson for today. Akid happily agrees to end the class early so he can meet his waiting wife. Walking out into the corridor, Akid surprises Rowena, who is still lingering near the window. Akid smiles warmly as he softly calls out Rowena's name in the hallway. Flustered and twirling her hair, Rowena apologetically claims she only intended to catch a quick glimpse. Akid playfully reveals he knew she was there the whole time, leaving her completely shocked. Rowena panics internally, worried the tutor will scold her for constantly interrupting Akid's magic classes. Akid gently smiles and reassures his anxious wife that her presence did not bother him. Suddenly, Count Harrington looms ominously behind Rowena, calling out to her with a stern expression. A gasp of shock escapes Rowena as Count Harrington sternly warns her against further class disruptions. Rowena stubbornly resolves to herself that she cannot let his harsh warning slide. The tutor threatens to close the curtains next time, leaving Rowena utterly devastated by the prospect. Stepping in, Akid promises to focus more and asks the tutor not to scold his wife. Overwhelmed by his sweet, protective gesture, Rowena looks at Akid with starry, deeply touched eyes. Defeated by the young duke's glee, Count Harrington sighs and agrees to let the matter go. As the tutor departs, Rowena bids him farewell while secretly feeling slightly guilty about dismissing him. Shifting the mood, Rowena happily mentions receiving Akid's gift and asks when he bought the bird. Walking beside her, Akid explains he bought the carrier bird during a recent weekend outing. Rowena happily praises the courageous red bird, which is currently resting on a cushion eating grapes. Rowena notes that she is always receiving things from Akid, but he insists he only gave it out of desire. Rowena eagerly insists on giving him a gift in return, asking what he would like. Akid falls into a quiet, thoughtful silence as he considers her exciting offer. Without warning, Akid suddenly takes a decisive step forward toward his surprised wife. Akid leans in incredibly close, catching Rowena completely off guard under the warm evening sun. With a gentle touch, Akid leans in and softly kisses Rowena on the peak. Left completely stunned and wide-eyed, Rowena is left speechless as Akid softly declares that this is enough. Akid confesses his jealousy over the goodnight kiss. Rowena reels in shock, overwhelmed by his sudden and direct romantic confession. Overwhelmed, Rowena dramatically swoons as Akid panics and calls for a doctor. Akid gently clasps her hand, grounding her. Rowena requests that they remain holding hands like this for a bit longer. Akid softly agrees, and the two enjoy a quiet moment holding hands in the courtyard. Rowena happily whispers to herself how much she truly likes Akid. Akid is taken aback by her sweet, unexpected confession. Akid softly murmurs his agreement in return, his face turning a gentle shade of pink. Rowena blinks in confusion, having missed his quiet response. Akid asks if she feels better, while Rowena apologizes for suddenly losing her balance. Rowena clutches her heart tightly, trying to calm her racing pulse. With sudden courage, Rowena stands on her tiptoes and plants a quick kiss on his cheek. A heavily blushing Rowena loudly wishes him a good night before preparing to flee. Declaring her hasty departure, she quickly spins around on her heels. Rowena sprints away in embarrassment, leaving Akid standing alone in the wide corridor. Akid gently touches his cheek, stunned by the unexpected parting kiss. Shaded in embarrassment, Akid stands frozen as a deep blush overtakes his face. A shocked scream echoes from the grand manor, shattering the peaceful morning. Rowena trembles in sheer disbelief upon reading that her business was targeted again. The maid confirms the magic stone was destroyed, prompting Rowena to ask about the recording. The maid explains the recording vanished, suggesting a thief is actively hunting the magic stones. Rowena panics over the business threat while her maid asks what their next step should be. Rowena resolutely declares they must capture the thief hunting their magical drone stones. Rowena quickly drafts a letter using a quill pen to address the situation. She securely fastens the message roll to her faithful carrier bird Kina. Rowena bids her carrier bird a safe flight as it takes to the sky. The maid notes the bird's massive size, but Rowena explains it is still growing. When asked about Tessel, Rowena plans to consult her mother and travel with guards. The maid solemnly warns Rowena to be careful, catching her young mistress off guard. Rowena notes that the Grand Duchess has been in a terrible mood lately. The tense atmosphere grows heavier, reflecting the Grand Duchess's increasingly grim demeanor. Elena sits in silence, staring grimly at a letter from Damien Hadelis. Meanwhile, Akid and Rowena share a quiet moment together in the sunny tea room. Akid calls out to Rowena with a soft, concerned expression on his face. Rowena turns her attention to him, wondering what is on his mind. Akid asks why she has been so distant, and Rowena explains her business issues. Akid seems saddened by her busy schedule, but Rowena quickly reassures him. Akid expresses concern over her working too hard, making Rowena feel incredibly guilty. She internally admits she was actually avoiding him out of embarrassment over their kiss. Seeing his sadness, Rowena happily resolves to endure her embarrassment to spend time together. Elena suddenly enters, dryly pointing out that Rowena is daydreaming and salivating. Gasping in surprise, Rowena quickly wipes her face and greets her mother. Elena gracefully takes her seat, maintaining her calm yet heavy presence. An awkward, chilly silence instantly fills the room as they sit together. Feeling the mounting tension, Rowena nervously asks her mother what is wrong. Elena lets out a heavy sigh, somberly announcing that the Duke is injured. They gasp in shock as Elena explains the Duke was hurt rescuing another child. Elena deduces the Duke is severely injured based on his uncharacteristic, joke-filled response letter. Confused by the logic, Rowena asks how she can be so certain about his condition. Elena recalls how the black-haired Duke is terrible at pretending to be uninjured, flashing back to him crying out in pain after acting tough as a child. Elena dryly notes that the Duke constantly puts on a tough front to act strong and manly. Rowena looks completely starry-eyed and captivated, deeply admiring the Duke's legendary toughness. When Elena asks why she is being stared at, a cheerful Rowena eagerly begs her mother to keep telling stories. Elena inquires about the visit, prompting Rowena to request night guards for her upcoming trip to investigate the soil. Rowena explains that she needs to travel to Tessel territory to investigate the recent wave of mysterious drone destruction. Elena muses that Tessel suffered severe avalanche damage and notes she has been looking for a suitable way to deliver aid. A kid suddenly speaks up and volunteers to personally go to the Tessel territory. Kid explains that it is his duty to handle family matters while the others are away. Elena quickly agrees to the plan, deciding that both Akid and Rowena will travel to Tessel together. Rowena enthusiastically thanks her mother as Elena promises to provide ample soldier escorts for their safety. The scene shifts to a sunny military camp nestled in a lush mountainous forest. Inside a tent, a wounded man with black hair carefully wraps a white bandage around his shoulder. The doctor warns the Duke that he must rest for another day to fully recover from a paralyzing monster bite. The Duke optimistically remarks that he can use the recovery time to finally get some long overdue rest. The doctor holds a blood-soaked bandage, sternly pointing out that the deep bite was nearly fatal. Dismissing the concern, the Duke waves his hand and tells the nagging doctor that survival is all that matters. With the doctor leaving, Ethan folds his arms and asks about the status of the child the Duke rescued. Ethan confirms that the child is completely safe and was found without any physical injuries. Hearing the good news, the Duke lets out a quiet sigh of relief. Ethan steps closer and places a supportive hand on the Duke's bare shoulder. Ethan scolds his lord, calling his actions reckless for jumping directly into a monster's attack range. The Duke merely responds with a knowing, confident smirk at his subordinate's lecture. The Duke asks Ethan if he also witnessed how the young girl's incredible power held back the spreading contamination. Ethan falls silent as he recalls the girl's extraordinary mystical display. Ethan wonders if the girl is the legendary Saintess, to which the Duke notes her survival in the pollution is highly suspicious. The Duke muses that if she is indeed a Saintess, resolving the contamination is only a matter of her cooperation. Ethan admits he briefly feared the Duke had acted out of pure reckless foolishness instead of strategic intent. The Duke dryly grumbles about the harsh criticism while Ethan playfully shrugs off his mock offense. The Duke orders a thorough investigation into the child's identity, background, and how she ended up there. Ethan suggests the girl is likely an abandoned orphan left behind during the territory's hasty evacuation. The Duke notes that an abandoned child would be easier to handle without complicated custody disputes. Ethan asks with genuine curiosity if the Duke is planning to adopt the young girl. The Duke firmly states that one child is enough, wanting to avoid angering his wife any further. When Ethan deadpans about the real reasons his wife dislikes him, the Duke jokingly threatens to send him underground. Ethan clears his throat and asks if he intends to send her to the temple, prompting the Duke to say he will think it over. The Duke resolves to verify the girl's status as a Saintess before deciding her permanent home. Ethan pauses, placing a hand over his chest as he reflects in silence. Noticing the gesture, the Duke asks with concern if Ethan is in any physical pain. A memory flashes of Elena crying as she gently covers a scar on her shoulder with red rose tattoos. In the memory, Elena softly asks if her shoulder no longer looks hideous with the rose design. Back in the present, the Duke touches his bandaged shoulder and quietly wonders if he should get a rose tattoo as well. When a confused Ethan asks for clarification, the Duke explains his idea of getting a tattoo on his shoulder. Ethan reacts with absolute disgust, bluntly expressing his disapproval of the Duke's tattoo idea. Completely flat, the Duke instantly orders his subordinate to leave the tent. Traveling through a snow-covered valley, Rowena worries about the massive, highly conspicuous carriage convoy, though Akid insists on the heavy security. Upon arriving, they dismount as the administrator notes that such security is necessary due to northern monsters. The local administrator, Matthew Tessel, warmly welcomes them and expresses relief at their safe arrival. Rowena thanks Matthew and introduces Koberstein, the brilliant artificer who accompanied her to inspect the faulty drone systems. Matthew guides the group through the snow, stating that all requested drone route documents are ready for their review. Matthew politely invites his guests inside the stone cabin amidst the snowy weather. Matthew points to a map, explaining that a specific area has a baffling number of breakdowns. Koberstein asks if the location is busy, but Matthew explains it is a dangerous, deserted path, prompting Rowena to note how suspicious it is that breakdowns only occur where people are absent. A kid calmly points out that crime is far easier to commit in deserted areas. The kid asks if Terms can inspect the terrain, and Matthew confirms there is a nearby vantage point. Rowena excitedly suggests they set out immediately to inspect the area. The door bursts open as a panicked messenger runs in shouting Matthew's name. The messenger urgently insists Matthew see something while Matthew scolds him for his impolite behavior in front of guests. The apologetic messenger reveals they have finally discovered the culprit responsible for destroying the drones. A tense silence falls over the room as everyone processes the sudden news. Following the snow tracks to a door, they prepare to catch the culprit as a strange sound echoes from inside. Rowena quietly opens the door, wondering what the creature could possibly be eating inside. Inside, they discover a small white cat with glowing yellow eyes chewing on the magical drone pieces. Matthew and his messenger gasp in absolute shock upon realizing the culprit is just a cat. The small white cat fiercely clings to a small fabric bag in its mouth. The cat suddenly leaps through the doorway, startling everyone as it makes a swift escape. Clinging tightly to its stolen bag, the white cat races away with determined yellow eyes. Matthew points in sheer disbelief at the wooden doorframe, which has been heavily splintered. Terrified, the messenger asks if they were nearly killed by a dangerous monster disguised as a cat. Two winged fairies suddenly appear in front of a surprised Rowena. The fairies claim they can smell the creature's trail and urge them to give chase immediately. Hearing the fairies' guidance, Rowena looks back at Akid with newfound resolve to pursue it. Akid prepares to mount a horse, asking Matthew if he can borrow it for the chase. Akid and Rowena ride off together on horseback, charging through the snow-covered valley. Akid focuses ahead with intense concentration, determined to catch up with their target. They spot the white cat ahead, which turns around and tenses up defensively in the snow. The lavender-haired fairy excitedly identifies the white cat as a mythical divine beast. Akid quickly casts a protective magical shield around Rowena as a sudden surge of energy sweeps through. A glowing blue barrier envelops them, shielding them from any potential danger in the snow. The fairy gently floats down to greet the defensive white cat. Akid marvels at how quickly the beast calmed down, while Rowena explains that spirits naturally get along with divine beasts. Grr, the white cat growls softly, dropping its stolen bag as Rowena carefully steps closer. The cat tenses up aggressively, prompting Akid to watch its movements with a vigilant gaze. Akid prepares his weapon, warning Rowena that a divine beast could still be highly dangerous. Rowena gently reassures Akid, stating that her spirits will protect them if the beast attacks. The white cat backs away defensively, maintaining its cautious stance in the snow. Rowena tells the confused cat she won't steal its bag, offering her warm magical energy instead. Rowena smiles softly as her gentle magic glows, hoping to earn the creature's trust. Drawn to her warm aura, the white cat cautiously approaches and sniffs her glowing hand. The cat gently licks her hand, though Rowena notes it seems desperately weakened. Rowena gently scoops the small, exhausted white cat into her arms. Holding the cat close, Rowena softly invites the divine beast to return with them. The cat lets out a soft, contented meow, signaling its agreement to accompany them. Back inside the cabin, Kobestein gasps in absolute shock upon hearing their discovery. Kobestein leaps up, shouting in disbelief at the mention of a divine beast. Kobestein drops his papers in surprise as Akid and Rowena calmly confirm the news. Kobestein points out the cat lacks a core stone and is too small, but Rowena explains this is not its true form. Rowena explains that the creature is too starved and weak to transform back into its true shape. Concerned for their safety, Kobestein asks if they should put restraints on the divine beast. Rowena firmly rejects the idea, explaining the beast is harmless, and a defeated Kobestein reluctantly agrees. Rowena internally notes that Kobestein's worry is natural since he is unaware of her contractor status. Looking determined, Rowena holds the small white cat closely in her arms. Rowena silently ponders that the real issue lies in what comes next for them. Rowena worries that the cat must win over her in-laws' affection, fearing she will be forced to let it go if the family refuses to raise it. Reacting with sudden surprise, Akid feels a jolt of alarm as he silently laments that he too is only living there on sufferance. Looking incredibly pitiful with teary yellow eyes, the small white cat lets out a soft, plaintive meow. Overflowing with emotion, Chibi, Rowena, and the tearful cat weep together in dramatic, sympathetic unison. Under a dramatic flash of lightning, Rowena nervously anticipates the Grand Duchess's legendary, unyielding opposition to her new pet. Rowena confidently assumes that the small creature's adorable appearance will easily breach the Grand Duchess's strict defenses. Outside the magnificent white castle, a concerned voice echoes, expressing sudden anxiety about letting Rowena go outdoors anymore. Standing in the hall, a startled Elena looks down and questions Rowena about the cat. Holding the cat proudly, Rowena declares that the creature is not a mere cat but a divine beast. Elena demands clarification, prompting Rowena to explain she rescued the starving creature from a landfill where it was eating magic stones. Elena sternly warns Rowena that this is not a temporary shelter, but Rowena pleadingly insists on the beast's divine nature. Holding her temple in frustration, Elena complains that having a spirit and now a divine beast is an overwhelming problem. Kneeling down, Rowena watches as the cautious white cat slowly walks across the carpet toward Elena. The divine beast initiates phase 1 of its world domination plan by rubbing against her skirt. Taken aback by the cat's affectionate touch, Elena stammers while trying to maintain her stern posture. Looking up with sparkling eyes, the cute cat lets out a soft mew, pleading to be kept. Elena reluctantly yields, coughing politely as she agrees to keep it temporarily, causing Rowena and the cat to cheer joyfully. Standing tall, Elena asks what the cat's name is, to which a kneeling Rowena proudly replies that it is Snowy. Elena disapprovingly remarks that it is a name fit for a mutt, prompting a sweat-dropping Rowena to admit she named it. Rowena frantically suggests other basic names like Snowball or Cheese, while privately noting that Elena clearly dislikes them all. The kid steps in to support Rowena, pointing out that she liked Snowy best and that changing it now would confuse the cat. Cuddling the cat close, Rowena stubbornly maintains her absolute preference for the name Snowy. Bursting into dramatic tears, Rowena shouts her hatred and runs off, leaving a startled Elena desperately trying to explain. Elena calls out to Rowena as the girl flees down the carpet, wondering in bewilderment if she really loved the name that much. The scene shifts to the quiet, empty stone training arena surrounded by rows of weapons. Standing inside the training hall, Rowena gently instructs Snowy to finally return to its true form. Shrouded in a bright golden glow, a massive white paw with sharp claws stumps firmly onto the stone floor. The beast's powerful white jaws open, letting out a formidable roar as the transformation progresses. Standing in awe, Rowena gasps in absolute amazement at the incredible magical display unfolding before her. A magnificent giant white leopard with a glowing yellow gem on its forehead stands majestically before the tiny red-haired girl. Perched near the gem, the two fairies analyze the beast, identifying its earth attribute and joking that it could make a great guard dog. The fairies note that the imperial family has held the earth attribute for generations, prompting a sweat-dropping Rowena to worry in silence. Slumping her shoulders, Rowena nervously worries that her mother, who despises bad manners, is currently plotting a severe scolding for her. Rowena suddenly blinks in surprise as a massive shadow falls over her face. The giant white leopard affectionately nuzzles Rowena's cheek with a soft, gentle meow. Rowena giggles happily, wrapping her arms around the massive face of her loyal giant companion. Reaching her hand out, Rowena resolves to try her best to care for the beast now that she has decided to keep it. Closing her eyes, Rowena gently presses her forehead against the glowing yellow gem on the leopard's face. The giant white leopard contentedly rests its head on the floor, at peace by Rowena's side. Guided through the mansion, Rowena asks the maid if her mother requested to see her. The maid confirms she was sent to escort her, while a nervous Rowena anticipates a terrible scolding. With a soft creak, the ornate double wooden doors slowly open to reveal the room inside. Rowena quickly bows and apologizes for her rude departure, but a gentle Elena warmly assures her there is no need to apologize. Looking up in utter confusion, Rowena blinks in disbelief at her mother's unexpectedly kind reception. Rowena gasps in shock upon spotting a table piled high with cat toys, a scratching post, a brush, and a plush pillow. Elena warmly explains the gifts are to celebrate Snowy's adoption, leaving Rowena to realize her mother spent the dawn preparing them. Rowena's eyes swell with tears of deep gratitude, completely touched by her mother's secret, loving gesture. With a sudden joyful embrace, the red-haired girl throws her arms around her blonde mother. Looking up happily, Rowena expresses her deepest gratitude to her mother for adopting and caring for Snowy. Touched by her daughter's sweet words, Elena responds with a warm and gentle smile. Holding Rowena close, Elena asks her daughter if she can request a favor of her. Pointing down to the little white cat, Rowena asks her mother to help train Snowy. Elena tries to suggest someone else, but Rowena explains that spirits advised bonding is easier with shared attributes. Exasperated, Elena covers her forehead as her daughter persistently pleads for just a few short sessions. Snowy lets out a happy meow as Rowena cuddles the cat under Elena's watchful gaze. Elena gently asks if she still feels like a freeloader, catching a startled Rowena off guard. Elena explains that Akid was the one who told her about Rowena's persistent insecurities. Elena recalls her conversation with Akid, who explained that Rowena fears being cast out if she fails. Akid's determined words echo back, revealing his wish that Rowena would stop walking on eggshells. Elena dismisses the worries, playfully assuring Rowena that she is actually putting her mother to good use. Clutching Snowy tightly, Rowena beams with happiness, saying she is always incredibly grateful to her mother. Elena covers her face to hide her laughter as Snowy playfully kicks its soft paws. Under a quiet starry night sky, narration reveals that the crisis on Stig Island was resolved smoothly. The rescued child was revealed to be the Saintess, making purification easier despite the island being lost. Securing the Saintess as a key ally provided a powerful shield against any future demonic outbreaks. With persistent enemies still targeting the Saintess, the Grand Duke's patience is stretched to its absolute limit. Grand Duke demands to know the mastermind, but his knight reports the prisoners refuse to speak. Glaring at the bound captives, the Grand Duke coldly warns that they will soon regret their silence. The bloodied captive defiantly shouts back, claiming they are dead whether they choose to talk or not. Drawing his sword, the Grand Duke coldly points out that he can make their deaths quick or agonizing. The captive warns of a deadly curse from their organization, prompting the Grand Duke to question their identity. The captive spits back defiantly, shouting that the Emperor's dogs have no right to know their secrets. The Grand Duke responds with a dark, mocking chuckle, completely unfazed by the captive's fierce defiance. Dark magic swells as the Grand Duke explains his power specializes in paralyzing a victim's 5 senses. The captives suddenly gasp and foam at the mouth, succumbing to a hidden deadly poison. With a dull thud, the poisoned captive slumps lifelessly onto the cold stone floor. Ethan gasps in shock as all three captives suddenly collapse and die before their eyes. Looking down in confusion, the Grand Duke covers his nose as a foul odor fills the room. Realizing these match past symptoms of corrupt priests, Ethan calls the Grand Duke over to inspect a body. Peeling back the rope, they discover a distinct crescent moon tattoo etched into the captive's wrist. The Grand Duke recalls that corrupt priests from a past case bore this identical crescent moon mark. He remembers finding it suspicious that the blame for the past plot fell on a minor family. Clenching his fist tightly around his sword, he wonders if a hidden mastermind remains at large. Enraged that they dared to use his name and invade his territory, the Grand Duke's aura flares dangerously. The Grand Duke orders Ethan to capture everyone bearing that mark, and the knight asks where to begin. Stepping over the bodies, the Grand Duke vows they will get answers by hunting down the hideout. Walking out into the cool night, a soft voice suddenly calls out to the Grand Duke. Turning around, he looks surprised to find Mabel, the young saintess, wandering outside so late. Mabel anxiously asks if the bad guys were caught, and the Grand Duke confirms they were. Clutching her gown tightly to her chest, Mabel quietly confesses that she is deeply afraid. She trembles at the thought of the kidnappers returning to snatch her away once again. Looking up with wide, teary golden eyes, Mabel seeks some comfort from the Grand Duke. The Grand Duke gently reassures her that no one can snatch her as long as he is there. Reaching out hesitantly, the young saintess gently grabs the edge of his dark sleeve. Looking up with pleading, hopeful eyes, Mabel asks if they can sleep together tonight. In comical chibi forms, the Grand Duke flatly refuses, leaving Mabel to ask why not in disappointment. He begins to state it as a hassle when a sudden piercing scream echoes through the dark forest. Quiet is shattered as a sudden loud caw sounds from a red bird soaring. The silver-haired girl gasps in shock, warned to watch out as she steps back. She shrieks as the bird collides with her, prompting the Grand Duke to yell. The Grand Duke kneels to check on the fallen bird, leaving the girl confused. The Grand Duke checks the bird, worrying Rowena will be devastated by its terrible landing. The Grand Duke scolds the messenger bird, jokingly threatening to roast and eat it. The red bird caws back an outrage, leaving the Grand Duke thoroughly annoyed. The Grand Duke winces in pain as the angry bird pecks at his hand. The silver-haired girl looks on, silently admitting she was distracted by the noisy bird. The Grand Duke suggests they visit the doctor together to check on their injuries. He points out that the grumpy red bird is also injured from the crash. Inside the quiet tent, the doctor gently treats the silver-haired girl's injured hand. The silver-haired girl insists she is fine, though the Grand Duke remains doubtful. The red bird loudly protests her claim, pointing out her hand is bleeding. The Grand Duke pacifies the bird, promising to send it on its way soon. The silver-haired girl looks up, pleading with the Grand Duke to stay with her. He declines, explaining he must read the urgent letter the messenger bird delivered. Confirming her question, the Grand Duke excuses himself and walks out of the tent. The silver-haired girl stares silently, her golden eyes filled with deep, unspoken thoughts. Her attention is taken by a sudden, quick grind sounding from behind. The silver-haired girl smiles softly, wondering if she simply misheard the strange sound. Back at the palace, Rowena happily welcomes the red bird returning from its long flight. Rowena prepares to catch the bird, squeezing a golden floral cushion in anticipation. Calling out to Kina, Rowena holds up the cushion as the bird flies in. Red bird lands safely on the cushion, surrounded by a warm golden glow. Rowena blinks in surprise as she looks down at her avian messenger. She sighs softly upon noticing the white bandages wrapped around the bird's leg. Rowena reads the letter, learning her father expects to return home in 10 days. The letter reveals her father is returning early and offering to bring her presents. Rowena happily notes her father's good mood, wondering why he mentioned presents. Although Stig Island became desolate from contamination, Rowena is relieved she won't intervene. Rowena frowns, highly doubting the letter's claim that her involvement is unnecessary. She recalls the original novel where widespread contamination causes her tragic early death. Rowena remains deeply suspicious, wondering if her father has a secret plan. Sudden tap-tap sounds as Ashiel knocks, announcing his arrival outside. The wooden door opens as Ashiel steps in, bowing politely to his mistress. Ashiel brings an update on the person Rowena requested him to investigate. Ashiel reports that the orphanage has no record of a girl named Mabel. Rowena gasps in absolute shock, unable to believe Mabel is not there. Rowena is deeply troubled by the shocking realization that the novel's heroine is gone. She panics, knowing Mabel's complete disappearance could completely ruin the original timeline. Ashiel offers to expand the search, asking Rowena for any helpful clues. Rowena describes Mabel's silver hair and golden eyes, which Ashiel notes will help. Ashiel promises absolute discretion, assuring her he will not tell a soul. Rowena smiles warmly, expressing her deepest gratitude for his loyal help. A soft click sounds as Ashiel closes the door, promising better results. Looking out the tall windows, Rowena wonders where Mabel could have disappeared. She stands in quiet reflection, wondering if some hidden truth remains unknown. Ashiel meets Akid in the grand hallway, bowing respectfully to the young boy. Akid politely thanks the butler for his hard work while Rowena watches silently. Looking thoroughly confused, Akid asks Rowena what she needs to get ready. He pauses briefly, shifting his gaze as he addresses Rowena with quiet curiosity. Akid reveals their father departed for the capital early, leaving Rowena completely shocked. Akid reasons that an unexpected matter arose on their father's journey back home. Akid suggests it is much faster to meet their father directly in the capital. Feeling dejected, Rowena laments that she already prepared a special welcome sign. Rowena nervously fidgets, quietly feeling betrayed despite her lingering concern for her father. Asking about their departure, Rowena learns they will set off this weekend. Rowena gasps in pure terror upon learning they will stay at House Ethel. Akid explains the villa's broken water pipes left them with no other option. Akid defends his decision, explaining that he exhausted all other safe lodging choices. He explains that House Ethel is the most secure location for Imperial meetings. Rowena silently worries about Akid's sporadic pre-awakening magic seizures and his safety. Knowing Akid's life is endangered by seizures, Rowena resolves to endure any stay. Akid notes the stay keeps their true goal hidden, though Rowena remains hesitant. Akid confesses his discomfort with someone currently residing at the Ethel estate. Intrigued, Rowena asks Akid to specify who makes him feel so uneasy. Akid admits his intense dislike for the rude glaring of the young Duke Ethel. Rowena playfully waves off his concern, calling the young Duke simple-minded and harmless. Akid immediately grows suspicious, questioning how Rowena could possibly know the Duke's character. A heavy, tense silence falls over Akid as he awaits her sudden explanation. Akid points out her suspiciously deep familiarity, prompting an internal panic from Rowena. Rowena quickly fabricates an excuse, claiming her brothers complained about a muscle-brained classmate. She animatedly reinforces her lie, insisting her brothers cannot stand the foolish Duke. Akid sighs in acceptance, though he still warns against any potential imperial rudeness. Rowena fiercely declares she will kick the young Duke in the shins herself. A soft, genuine smile breaks across Akid's face at her spirited protective reaction. Rowena humorously notes to herself that she just saved Duke Ethel's life. The scene transitions to the grand imperial capital of Entravia under clear skies. Heavy carriage traffic fills the streets as noble families arrive for the gathering. Peering eagerly through the glass, Rowena marvels at the many unfamiliar noble families. Akid explains that many attendees have traveled a great distance for this occasion. Rowena observes Akid, wondering if the capital brings back painful childhood memories. She recalls that Akid lost his closest childhood friend in this very city. Rowena silently hopes this journey brings Akid some happy memories to ease his grief. Rowena wonders if Akid assumes she lived in the outskirts like he did. Rowena explains her unfamiliarity with the city, having only walked commoner paths before. Clapping her hands excitedly, Rowena expresses a deep desire to explore his childhood spots. Akid hesitates, admitting he knows a few places but doubts they are suitable. He explains most are unclean commoner hangouts, though Rowena dismisses the concern. Rowena insists she wants to see where Akid played before moving north. Akid warns of terrible public safety, but Rowena remains determined to see his home. Rowena eagerly requests that they visit his old storage room together in secret. She playfully begs Akid not to shake her off during their capital trip. Rowena smiles brightly, expressing her simple wish to play together, just the two of us. Akid looks at her, a warm and tender smile gracing his face. They gently interlock their pinky fingers to seal their secret childhood promise. Rowena and Akid happily make a pinky promise inside their moving carriage. The grand carriage finally arrives before a magnificent sunlit palace estate. A maid bows politely to welcome the Grand Duchess and her children home. A woman politely greets them, noting that it has been a long time since they last met. Rowena touches her red hair, wondering why the top of her head suddenly feels prickly. A peach-haired girl suddenly appears at a high window looking down at them. The peach-haired girl cheerfully shouts before quickly responding to someone calling her back inside. Rowena freezes in absolute shock as she recognizes the identity of the peach-haired girl. The peach-haired girl stands inside, staring blankly as several strange clocks float around her. Peach-haired girl waves her arms in confusion, leaving Rowena thoroughly puzzled. The maid asks why Rowena is staring up, and Rowena points out someone was there. The maid mentions that the girl was likely greeting Lady Catherine instead of attending class. Rowena trembles with dread, realizing Catherine knew their schedule and intended to meet them. The host explains they prepared an entire floor for them to comfortably relax. Rowena politely thanks the host as they are escorted through the grand mansion hallway. The maid announces they prepared separate rooms for everyone, catching Rowena completely off guard. The blonde woman insists separate rooms are better and promises they will speak later. Rowena desperately laments that she does not need this unwanted consideration regarding their separate rooms. The door opens to reveal a beautifully decorated, shimmering bedroom prepared for Rowena's stay. Rowena looks around, noting that the room looks surprisingly normal for a villainess's lair. Rowena reflects on her unexpected and deeply surprising encounter with Catherine earlier that day. Rowena suspects Catherine is hiding her true colors, recalling notebook details about her schemes. Mabel worriedly asks Catherine if she is all right upon seeing her hand is bleeding. Mabel explains they must carefully extract the glass shard to properly stop the bleeding. Catherine nervously pleads with Maven, questioning why she is acting so overly protective. The gray-haired girl looks up in surprise, questioning the mention of Lady Ethel. Catherine stumbles dizzily, claiming her anemia makes blood loss extremely dangerous for her. The blonde prince catches Catherine as she faints, asking what is going on. Catherine looks up with tearful, pleading eyes, putting on a fragile and helpless act. Catherine tearfully clings to the prince, insisting she only came to offer an apology. The blonde prince scolds Maven, sternly warning her that she has gone too far. Maven stands frozen, desperately trying to explain herself to the cold and distant prince. The prince gently comforts Catherine, taking the blame for the misunderstanding upon himself. The prince leads Catherine away, leaving Maven standing alone in the silent, dark hallway. Maven watches their retreating figures silently, her heart breaking from the harsh, unfair rejection. Maven breaks down in tears, deeply regretting that she ever came to the capital. Narration details Catherine's masterfully manipulative nature and how she successfully deceived everyone around her. Rowena resolves not to be fooled, but Catherine suddenly appears behind her, scaring her. Catherine apologizes for startling Rowena, explaining she was merely waiting quietly for her. Rowena gasps internally in shock as she looks up at Catherine's beautiful smiling face. Catherine blinks in surprise, tilting her head with an innocent and curious expression. Catherine kindly helps Rowena up from the floor, asking if she is hurt. Rowena asks how Catherine knows her name, learning she was Princess Aizen's friend. Catherine finds Rowena's speech incredibly cute, while Rowena can only offer a flustered thanks. Catherine urges Rowena to speak comfortably, and Rowena hesitantly agrees to drop formalities. Catherine asks for her name, and Rowena formally introduces herself as Rowena Hatteras. Catherine reveals that Duke Ethel predicted they would become great friends, surprising Rowena. Catherine gushes over their destined friendship, while Rowena silently rejects the cliché idea. Rowena grows increasingly suspicious of Catherine's bubbly demeanor, wondering what her true motives are. Catherine suddenly grabs Rowena's hands, excitedly asking if she is free to go out. Catherine drags a protesting Rowena away to see the horses before she can answer. Catherine animatedly talks about the cute newborn foals as she leads Rowena along. Catherine declares Rowena her first friend, while Rowena nervously ponders her fated role. Rowena internally panics, imagining Catherine staging a horse riding accident to break her leg or using her as a pawn. As Rowena walks away with Catherine, Akid's voice echoes down the hallway as he calls out to her. Relieved to see her brother, Rowena runs up and eagerly clings to Akid while calling out his name. Akid warns Rowena to be careful so she does not trip, while Catherine watches them silently. Catherine smiles radiantly as she introduces herself, surrounded by blooming flowers. Akid introduces himself as Akid Hadras, and Catherine cheerfully suggests they drop the formalities since she and Rowena already did. Catherine tilts her head in confusion as Akid silently dismisses her friendly attitude as incredibly petty. Akid grimly declares his dislike for House Ethel, prompting Rowena to realize he despises the place even in Edward's absence. When Rowena asks why, Catherine dismisses the question and suddenly grabs her hand to lead her away. Catherine insists there is nothing to be done about his attitude and firmly drags Rowena along. Catherine aggressively asserts that Akid can stay behind since Rowena already promised to spend time with her. Akid demands to know if House Ethel is always so shamelessly one-sided as the two glare at each other. Caught in the middle of their tense standoff, Rowena frantically wonders how things devolve so quickly. Catherine happily drags Rowena along while Akid keeps a close, watchful eye on them from behind. Catherine tells the siblings to wait outside the stable for a brief moment as she goes inside. Akid urgently whispers to Rowena that they must find another place to stay first thing tomorrow morning. Overhearing them, Catherine loudly insists from inside the stables that Akid can leave alone while Rowena stays behind. Catherine opens the heavy wooden stable door to show them the horses. Akid sighs in irritation, noting that Catherine is just as brazen and shameless as her brother. Akid reminds Rowena of their promise, dryly noting that kicking Catherine in the shins might be a bit excessive. Rowena quickly claims she was only joking and proposes they play along for now before slipping away. Akid lets out a soft, handsome smile that completely catches Rowena off guard. Rowena turns bright red, screaming internally at how heart-stoppingly handsome her brother's rare smile is. The group walks deeper into the cobblestone stable corridor, surrounded by stalls of horses. Catherine points out the newborn horses, naming the first two Doe and Ray. Catherine introduces the spotted horse as Minio, and Rowena politely compliments the musical rhythm of the names. Catherine giggles and thanks her, while Rowena finds her overwhelming cuteness nearly impossible to resist. Rowena frantically tells herself to get it together, recalling that she already has a husband waiting for her. Rowena realizes that even the heroine of the novel cannot resist Akid's exceptionally handsome looks. Akid suddenly reaches out and places his hand gently against Rowena's cheek, startling her. Feeling stuffy, Rowena looks toward the window and gasps in shock as she spots Edward peeking inside. A sudden loud noise echoes through the stables, causing Catherine to turn around in alarm. The stable doors creak open slowly as someone steps inside, their brown shoes illuminated by the sunlight. Catherine's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as she stares at the unexpected visitor. A refined blonde boy with striking red eyes enters the stable bathed in a soft glow. Rowena looks utterly baffled, wondering if she saw Zeronis when she was certain Edward was just there. Catherine excitedly explains to Zeronis that Rue had her babies and she was merely introducing them to Rowena. Zeronis smiles warmly and softly responds that he understands her excitement. Rowena is shocked to see Zeronis looking so comfortable, recalling that in the novel he was always incredibly awkward around Mabel. Rowena gasps in confusion as she is suddenly pulled away from her thoughts. Noticing her pale expression, Akid expresses concern about her health, while Rowena claims she is just a bit tired. Akid stares at her in silent worry, clearly unconvinced by her simple explanation. Deciding she needs to rest, Akid firmly grabs her hand and declares that they cannot stay here. Akid immediately begins leading Rowena out of the stables, leaving the others behind. Catherine shouts after them, demanding to know where they are going in such a rush. Catherine playfully waves and calls out, teasingly asking if they have managed to get themselves lost. Catherine beams brightly, her warm smile radiating genuine affection as she watches them. The scene transitions back to the breathtaking grandeur of the sun-drenched estate. The quiet hallway is suddenly filled with the sound of rapid, hurried footsteps running. Rowena joyfully leaps through the air to tackle her father in a warm, tight embrace. The dark-haired father holds Rowena close, jokingly commenting that she must have learned her landing style from Kina. Looking closely at his exhausted face, the red-haired girl asks if his time away was truly rough enough to leave him looking half dead. The father explains that being away for such a long time naturally left him with some wear and tear. The red-haired girl sweetly reassures him that he still looks dashing, which he accepts with mild amusement. The dark-haired father gazes at her intensely, dryly remarking that at least he has spared the trouble of breaking her legs. The blonde Grand Duchess enters the room, coldly noting she was ready to finish off his other shoulder if he returned in worse shape. The father sarcastically thanks her for the charming greeting, while she questions why he is lifting children with a ruined shoulder. The father cheerfully boasts about his practice holding people, deeply irritating the blonde Grand Duchess. The red-haired girl sweat drops, silently wondering why every single word out of her father's mouth manages to irritate her mother. The Grand Duchess reveals that the king informed her of an attack, catching the red-haired girl completely off guard. The father smugly teases his wife for worrying about him, prompting an outraged and flustered denial. An abrupt, painful groan of "ugh" slips from his lips as he collapses, sparking panic and a desperate call for a physician. The father quickly recovers, casually admitting he simply forgot about his injured shoulder in the moment. Father flashes a radiant, sparkling smile as he holds his shoulder, completely unfazed by his sudden outburst. The Grand Duchess stares in absolute silence, entirely dumbfounded by his shameless behavior. She furiously threatens to break his shoulder herself, while Rowena suspects the contaminated island altered her father's personality. A tiny blonde fairy hovers beside Rowena, warning her that her father carries a very strange scent. Rowena relays the spirit's warning to her father, who suddenly realizes what she means and reaches into his coat. The father pulls a wrapped package of test tubes out of his inner coat pocket. The family gathers around the table as the father lays out the wrapped package to show them. He reveals soil samples from Stick Island, explaining they are arranged in order from the least contaminated to the absolute worst. The red-haired girl looks on as the spirit inspects the tubes, declaring that they smell of dead land. The blue-haired spirit sadly hugs the dark, contaminated sample, stating the land is entirely beyond saving. The father grimly accepts her verdict, prompting Rowena to ask how they managed to halt the spreading contamination. He explains they were incredibly lucky to mine someone on Stick Island with divine power strong enough to trigger a saint's awakening. Hearing the word saint, the red-haired girl freezes in absolute shock as her heart beats rapidly. Rowena internally recalls that in the original novel, Mabel was also hailed as a saint with rivaling divine power. Distracted by her racing thoughts, Rowena is startled as the spirit accidentally knocks one of the test tubes off the table. The test tube plummets to the ground and shatters, scattering the highly contaminated black soil across the floor. Rowena watches the shattering glass in horror as her father panics, desperately shouting her name. The scene shifts to a serene, warm bath adorned with scattered red rose petals by a sunlit window. A pair of delicate bare feet slowly step into the petal-strewn steaming water. Relaxing in the bath, the gray-haired girl smiles contentedly, relieved to finally be back in the capital. She cups the warm water, reflecting on how desperately she struggled to escape her previous predicament. The memory resurfaces of the moment she unexpectedly crossed paths with Grand Duke Hadores. A dark royal carriage sits stopped along a quiet forest road in the middle of the night. Knights secure the clearing where several black-cloaked attackers lie defeated on the ground. Inside the carriage, the gray-haired girl looks up in surprise as the door is suddenly opened. Grand Duke Hadores warns her that she is being targeted, showing her a piece of cloth bearing a strange crest. Looking closely at the mark, she softly responds that she has never seen this crest before. The Grand Duke accepts her answer and decides not to press her any further. Instead, he arranges a new identity for her, allowing her to pass as the daughter of a count's household. Relieved by his help, she notes that having a proper noble background is essential for her to meet him. However, she realizes there is a pressing matter she must resolve before she can take her next step. The gray-haired girl steps out of the bath, leaving wet footprints on the floral rug. Standing in her robe, she holds a dagger, resolved to rid herself of the dark mages hunting her. She unsheaths the sharp blade, preparing to perform a secret ritual to mask her tracks. She slashes her hand, letting her blood drip down as a musical note mark glows brightly on her chest. Her dripping blood dissolves into dark smoke, activating her defensive magic against the dark mages. A powerful magic circle activates over her chest, successfully sealing away the glowing treble clef mark. The gray-haired girl watches quietly as her magical crest seals and a black crow descends. The gray-haired girl mutters softly as the black crow perches closely in front of her. She firmly commands the crow to stay out of her way, releasing it into the night sky while warning that she will find it herself only when she has need of it. A soft tap echoes through the night as black feathers drift slowly in the dark.